the man casually forged a sword casing, which shocked all the hunters in the examination hall. Even Unha, one of the strongest currently, wanted to immediately rush forward to seize it. The scene left all the judges unable to believe their eyes, for the sword he had made emitted an extremely terrifying aura. After the system appraised it, this fire-attributed sword casing was rated super rare, able both to store and to amplify magical power many times over. No one understood how a contestant could possess such fearsome forging skill, but they did not know that in his previous life this man had been the strongest blacksmith, and with his forging talent he created countless god-grade weapons for heroes. Afterwards he even joined them in killing 6 destructive demon gods. Yet, despite humanity's victory, he still could not survive, because among those 6 destructive demon gods, there was one called the Sea of Destruction. Although it was dead, most of the land was still swallowed by the sea of death it had created. Thinking of that, Sehun couldn't help but sneer at himself. I barely survived, and in the end I have to die in this sea. The surviving heroes also fell one after another. Even the hero tower that held the land up collapsed. This damned sea did not dissipate even though the demon god had been killed. At that moment a man behind him interrupted. Are you really planning to put on a one-man show here? Songha stepped in front of Sehun. He frowned slightly when he saw his bedraggled state. Anyone seeing him would think he was carrying the whole world on his shoulders. Mad dog Yom Songha. Hearing that, Louise turned and taunted in response to the mockery. The guy who had been lying there feigning illness now wants to act heroic, violent dog Louise Valent. Meanwhile Amir grabbed his head and complained, I told you so, right? Big brother is only enjoying himself after taking command of the Legion. Cold-blooded dog Amir Singh. After a brief silence and despite the others taking turns criticizing him, Sehun coldly ordered, Shut up, you lot would have been dead long ago if not for the gear I made. Last Blacksmith Lee Sehun. No sooner had he finished than Songha flew into a rage. What did you say? Louise muttered, This guy speaks harshly. And Amir reminded him, Big brother, that was a bit much. Then he let out a curse that made the atmosphere suddenly suffocating. Shut your mouths, you brats. If you don't like using them, give all the equipment back to me. In that moment only one thought remained in Sehun's mind. The 3 standing before me are the trio of dogs. They don't side with humanity, nor do they belong to those damned demon tribes. They act only according to their own desires. They always put personal interest above all else. They are men who stay out of wars to profit. Though utterly selfish scoundrels, they survived until this moment, and in the end they were the most active participants. Thinking this, Seo Hun vaguely wondered whether the outcome would have been better if they had acted earlier. Once again his gaze was interrupted by the sun at the horizon over the sea. Sehun calmly sat down on the ground and glanced back. Is there anyone still holding out? Hearing this, Yom Song-ha doubled over, clutching his stomach, and let out a dry sound. I'm at my limit. My internal organs are all crushed. Louise looked up into the void and spoke slowly. The situation here isn't any better. Seems we've been hit by a curse. Blood won't stop flowing. Over here Amir kept complaining that his heart's been pierced and he's probably done for. Seeing that, Sehun sighed helplessly. See? You should have worked together from the start. Even as they were dying he coldly cursed them instead of selfishly only worrying about themselves. You 3 damn dogs. Suddenly a loud noise rang out, drawing Sehun's attention. He saw Yom Song-ha's group, and Amir had collapsed. At the sight he calmly stood and breathed a faint sigh. Until the very end they still caused trouble. Then Sehun stepped forward and gently took hold of the hammer. Sehun lifted the object into the air, his gaze fixed on the piece of metal below. After a while he carefully drove blades into the ground beside Amir's body. Sehun's voice, hoarse with anger, said, Appreciate your equipment a little. Ruined like this? How can you use it? He thought to himself that at least this pile could serve as their tombstone. When he finished, Sehun looked up at the endless sky, standing silent in the roaring sea wind and mocking himself. Is it my turn now? Sehun's blood-cracked hand rose slowly. His calm, cold gaze. This will be the last time I do this. Immediately he struck the center of his chest hard. The space trembled and lines of luminous script hovered before Sehun. An indifferent voice echoed in his head. Extracting the link from subject Lee Sehun, the linkage level with creator Lee Sehun reached the abyssal tier. A crystal formed in his hand. A pale blue light appeared around the ore-like mass as the cold system explained the unique skill. The link Blacksmith can extract special or from a connected target. The ore's properties depend on the relationship and potential of the subject. Sehun stared at the crystal, thinking that if he used it on himself the result would be worse than a scrap of common iron. Colorless or a linked or extracted from Sehun, utterly empty. If only he'd awakened this ability a bit earlier. He looked at the pail or in his hand, nails digging in as he whispered like a prayer to the darkness. If there's nothing inside, then swallow the regret that's devouring me. Then Sehun suddenly raised the hammer high as a rumble echoed from afar. He looked up at the churning Black Sea. The sound now was that of the Dead Sea or the waves he'd heard all along. But one thing he was certain of. Whenever that sound rang in his ears, in that moment Sehun crazily slammed the hammer onto the object. A bold thought struck him that a masterpiece beyond imagination would be born. At the final strike, a column of light suddenly shot straight up into the sky. He raised the dagger and said in a low, resolute voice, "Until the end there will still be no special ability?" After saying that, Sehun couldn't help but mock himself. He'd expected something good to appear, even if it was his own linked stone. Staring at the colorless metal in his hand, he muttered that it remained tediously plain. Instead, "I'll end this life with my own hands." Just then Sehun's facial muscles suddenly tensed and his eyes rolled back. Then he burst into a grotesque laugh that echoed over the Dead Sea. "Mad and tragic. I'm truly a lunatic to think the only thing I'll do until the end is swing the forging hammer." In that moment Sehun's mind sank into a tangle of thoughts. And when he cast aside the final sword he realized one truth. The sound of waves that has appeared since I awakened my magic. I kept wondering what that noise meant. It turned out to be the presence of the Sea of Destruction. His eyes closed. Regret pressed on him like a boulder, lips trembling in remorse. If only I'd understood sooner or had persuaded those 3 dogs earlier. Then Sehun denied it. No, if I had forged for others even a little earlier, perhaps things could have turned out differently. The space around Sehun suddenly warped and a gigantic image of ancient weaponry appeared. An announcement voice echoed. "The spiritual image of the war machine has manifested. The primal regression imagery skill is being activated." Amid the blinding light, a strange voice rang out calmly. "Welcome, contestant." He opened his eyes wide. His breathing rapid, he couldn't help feeling a bit panicked. "What? I'm not dead yet." Across from him, Assistant Ha blinked in bewilderment and watched. "Contestant Lee Sehun? What are you doing there?" Hearing that, Lee Sehun shivered. "Contestant. It's been 31 years since I last heard that word." Then he suddenly shouted, "How can you stand there dazed in the middle of the entrance exam?" At the end of the sentence Sehun widened his eyes. "What?" Sehun swept his gaze around the exam. Could this be about 31 years ago? Could this be the babble of the past? Are these memories returning just before I close my eyes? His eyes flared in shock as he recalled the final moment. The regression imagery phenomenon he saw just before dying. The air around Sehun seemed to freeze. Rapid breathing, regressing to the origin point? Could this truly be caused by the linked stone weapon of mine? Assistant Ha said sternly, "This is the final warning for you, contestant Lee Sehun." He continued, "If you don't behave properly right now, I'll have you expelled." Hearing this, Sehun instinctively nodded. Yes, Sehun stared at the hammer below, so that's what regression meant. His hand clenched in midair as if gripping an invisible hammer shaft. If I had recognized the gifts sooner and begun swinging the forging hammer earlier, could I have changed everything? Sehun reflexively denied it fiercely. No, that's not the most important thing. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat steadied. His body felt reborn in that moment of awakening. He stared at his palm. Only one thing truly mattered now, and he had to accomplish it. Thinking this, Sehun's mouth curved. He straightened up in the hall, eyes blazing like a forge stoked to its first flame. A low voice resonated in his mind. "You must protect everything." Sehun's mouth lifted again. "This life I will pass the Babel exam." He gently swung the hammer high. His eyes brightened with the thought that facing those 3 dogs was only the beginning. Then suddenly a small flame flared. Incheol shivered and leaned slightly toward his forge. Surprise shone in his eyes. That contestant. He saw Sehun furiously striking the metal with his hammer. Incheol immediately stepped closer, eyes fixed on Sehun's hands. astonishing. It looked slow, but the rhythm matched a clear, pure resonance perfectly. He carefully tracked the metal piece in Sehun's hands with his eyes, unable to help but exclaim that this was peak forging skill. In that moment Inon stood motionless, his eyes never leaving him. He swallowed dryly, eyes fixed on the bar of iron taking shape. What level of perfection is this? At the same time Assistant Ha widened his eyes in shock. Did he really make that? Seeing that, Inon sneered, a genius applicant. If he submitted this as is, he'd pass immediately. Just then Sehun struck the hammer hard onto the metal. The loud noise drew everyone's attention, and suddenly the metal shattered into fragments. Assistant Ha nearly froze on the spot. Over here in Sheol stared in astonishment, eyes wide. After a brief silence his mouth twitched. Though I still have a long way to go, flaunting such trash. He stopped the hammer midair, his gaze turning cold. That is something I absolutely cannot tolerate as a blacksmith. Witnessing that, Assistant Ha screamed frantically. You just destroyed a weapon in front of the professor. Do you think smithing is a joke? Sehun calmly called out, Judge. Before in Sheol's bewildered eyes, he casually made a request. I want to redo the test. Then he shouted again. Hey, contestant. He suddenly cut in. Assistant Ha, in Sheol folded his arms and issued a brief but decisive order. Bring him the remaining materials. Assistant Ha, surprised, stammered, what? He raised an eyebrow and fixed him with a cold look. He didn't actually break the rules, did he? Or do you want me to fetch them myself? No objections. Assistant Ha hurriedly replied. I'll bring the materials right away. Incheol stepped close to the forge and looked straight into Sehun's eyes, his voice warm but forceful. Young man, he sternly reminded him. Do you know there are only 40 minutes left in the exam? Sehun only nodded, yes. Incheol stared at the shards and asked curiously. So you think smashing it was the right decision? At that, Sehun's gaze flicked quickly to the destroyed metal blocks. Finally, he turned to Incheol with unwavering determination. I can't submit something like that. Over here Incheol tilted his head, his eyes thoughtful, then slowly said, all right, do your best. After a moment, Sehun's eyes flamed with determination once more. He inhaled deeply, feeling this young but frail body, and thought tensely. With this body, perfect forging is truly difficult. Thinking this, Sehun frowned. Magic, strength, and time are all running out, so the best choice in this situation is... Suddenly a violent sizzle erupted from the forge. Several contestants startled and turned. What's that sound? One shouted in alarm. Is that bastard pumping mana into the ignition? Someone stepped forward halfway and yelled, Hey! What are you doing? If those stones catch fire they'll explode. Hurry and... Meanwhile Sehun calmly reached out and ignited the flame. The room fell silent as a 5-colored fire flared violently without exploding. Someone blurted, no way, that madman. At that moment an invisible mana stream suddenly shot into him. At the horrifying sight, some people panicked and shouted, It's on fire! Bring the fire extinguisher. Quick! Assistant Ha trembled and pleaded, Professor, tell him to stop. Incheol replied tersely, Let him do it. Don't react like the other contestants, you two mustn't. Saying that, he seriously signaled, Observe the flow of the flame carefully. He couldn't help feeling a little unsettled, strange. Right before Sehun was the 5-colored fire spirit. A high-temperature flame amplified by the resonance of 5 ignition types. He curled his lip, eyes fixed on the flame. It demanded extremely precise mana control, but it was an outstanding technique, usable even when mana is at a minimum. One contestant stammered in disbelief, What? It didn't explode? Another hesitated, Wait, could that be? Someone pointed at the ingot in the forge and shouted in amazement. The color of the ingot has changed. Witnessing that, Incheol quickly understood. So that's it. He resonated the ignition stones to amplify the blaze and alter the ingot's properties. He looked at Sehun with concern. This would significantly shorten the time needed for forging. However, with only 30 minutes left, time was still tight. Thinking that, Incheol silently confirmed that Sehun's earlier forging stroke was excellent too. But if that's all, he wouldn't finish in time. Sharp metal shards flew into the air. Seeing this, he sneered. a rare spark lighting his gaze. Then Sehun clenched the object with his bare hands and slowly placed it into the forge. Sehun breathed out each breath with difficulty. After a while, he resumed striking the metal hard with the hammer. Suddenly Sehun's arm halted midair. Seeing that, he gritted his teeth, feeling his mana drained. He muttered, "Damn. I'm out of mana and the protective layer has shattered. Damn this weak body. I need to start training as soon as this exam ends." Meanwhile, somehow blood was seeping from Sehun's palm, slowly spreading across his hand. In that moment he had one thought. I cannot waste a single second. Immediately Sehun once again hammered frantically, silently deciding to push his body to the limit. At that moment Inchiol's voice rang out. 10 minutes, 3 minutes, the final minute, he bellowed, his voice shaking the space. 1 minute. No sooner had the sound ended than Sehun immediately raised the sword in his hands. Inchiol shouted again. Stop. He heard that and slightly parted his lips, exhaling. At that, Sehun clenched his hand beneath the table as fresh blood continued to spill. At the same time, the system's bright screen flashed. Complete. The 5-colored flame sword was finished. You have acquired the Artisan Flame Skill C. The announcement continued in the air. The judgment result for the 5-colored flame sword is high quality grade. Upper mid, a curved sword engraved with 5 flames was depicted. The flames compressed within the blade react to mana, producing brilliant hues. The item revealed the potential of its smith. The sword's color and properties may vary slightly depending on the nature of the mana channeled into it. Someone repeated in a trembling voice. The weapon's rank is high. Sehun added, I hope you checked the detailed description in the info window. Everyone can see it's a passing result. Assistant Ha burst out excitedly, his voice almost shouting as the air erupted. Passed. Inchiol waved his hand to signal silence. Quiet, kid. He immediately lowered his voice. Sorry, sir. The scene shifted to a room. It was Professor Kim in Inchiol's office. Inside, he glanced back anxiously. Sehun sat up straight at the desk and asked with unwavering eyes, Is this sword worthy to submit this time? Inchiol was silent for a moment, then replied, For now, yes. He exhaled and said, You still don't look very satisfied, Lee Sehun. I'll be blunt. Inchiol's tone dropped heavy, as if bearing the weight of an era. This place won't meet your standards. He emphasized each word. You'd be better off withdrawing your application. Inchiol continued in a low voice, Babel's reputation can be overwhelming, but the metallurgy department hasn't produced any notable achievements lately. Sehun remained silent, narrowing his eyes as he looked at him. It's a truth I already know well. Babel's metallurgy department will be shut down in 8 years due to declining standards. In the future, Vulcan Academy will become the world's best forging academy. After a moment's hesitation, Inchiol tentatively suggested, Perhaps Vulcan will be the best in the future. At that, Sehun interrupted, You're wrong, Professor. The best won't be Vulcan. He pointed to himself with confident eyes. It will be Babel, where I'm about to enroll. He flinched slightly at that, and his gaze wavered noticeably. Inchiol stared at Sehun, clearly skeptical yet astonished. Inchiol narrowed his eyes, studying him sharply, and said slowly and challengingly, In that case you must first become the department's top student. Are you confident? Sehun answered without hesitation, of course. At least among students, no one will surpass me. No sooner had he finished than Inchiol's expression changed. He asked sternly, Do you know the process for selecting the department valedictorian at Babel? Prompted by the question, Sehun recited the information mechanically. They choose a candidate for department valedictorian through a supplementary exam between the top 2 students, and from those candidates the valedictorian is determined. That's what I know. Babel Academy broadly divides its students into 3 departments. Combat Department, Akar Ka, Support Department, UR, Technology Department, Borsipa. Within each department, dozens of specializations intertwine like root systems. Becoming the department valedictorian means you've received the highest evaluation across those countless specializations and are recognized by all of Babel as a top talent. Back in reality, Inchiol showed clear tension. His arms tightened until they trembled. Inchiol turned to Sehun and said earnestly, I'll say it again. Not as a professor but as a senior smith. He continued in a weary tone, Even if you become the department valedictorian, It's hard to expect success as a smith here. Go to Vulcan Academy. Incheol nodded slightly as if deciding for him. That's the path for you. Sehun looked at the man before him with rare respect, thinking inwardly to place his junior's future above his own. He truly is an upstanding man. After a brief silence, Sehun reiterated, the environment isn't important as I just said. His eyes lit up and his voice rang with excitement. Babel, where I'm about to enroll, will soon become the best. Incheol looked momentarily bewildered. He will become the best. Then the corner of his mouth lifted, revealing interest. Incheol couldn't help but laugh and reached out towards Sehun. It was a declaration beyond mere arrogance. But for some reason, I didn't dislike it. He reached out, eyes sincere as he looked at him. I'm very much looking forward to working with you. Seeing that, Sehun didn't hesitate and gripped Incheol's hand tightly. Gathering his strength in the grasp, the corner of his mouth lifted. Same here, sparkling text appeared before him. A link to target Kim Incheol has been established. The creator link with Sehun is now level 1, and is extracting the link from target Kim Incheol. Sehun tightened his forearm, and a suspended object appeared in the center of his palm. A metal block manifested, a smoldering fire burning inside as the system described. Iron link carrying flame, rank, high quality, upper mid, a kind of metal that contains a flame. It has wood-like properties and can store fire within. At Sehun's home, he stared blankly at the burning object in his hand. Sehun turned the small metal block in his hand. It's not bad. But is it only this size? He pressed his lips and analyzed. Link extraction quantifies the relationship with a specific target to derive ores that don't naturally exist. Sehun stared at the metal block with a solemn look. The problem is the link level is low, making it hard to utilize now. Looking at the stat panel before him, he smiled bitterly. Moreover, compared to Babel's new students, his stats were pathetic. He lifted his head and sighed helplessly. It's unfortunate, but if that's the price for returning to the past, it's still cheap, he muttered to himself, forcing calm. Right? Don't rush. Sehun's eyes flashed with murderous intent as he thought of the future. Wanting more is just greed. There's still time to crush those fiendish bastards. The demon world monsters threaten not just humanity but the entire planet. The 6 great demon gods causing humanity's annihilation was entirely their plan. Sehun stared into the void, thinking that to stop them he couldn't be picky about means or methods. He couldn't let himself be thrown off by critical future events, so he needed to acquire weapons or skills tied to his memories first. He nodded slightly to himself in confirmation. The first step of the plan to enroll in Babel was settled. Then at that moment a flash of light drew Sehun's attention. His eyes widened in astonishment. This is, the system announced solemnly. User Sehun's link level has reached level 1. A link stamp skill has been added. 1 week later at Babel Academy. Babel Academy rose under the morning sun. At the same time, in a hallway within the academy, Sehun exhaled in frustration. Damn it! I'm lost again. This is the right place, right? He looked around the wide corridor and stopped when he saw the familiar sign. Here it is. As he entered, Sehun cautiously greeted good morning. Someone suddenly cut in. Student Lee Sehun. After a moment of confusion, he fell into stunned silence. Michael tapped the table slowly and sneered. Looking rather relaxed, aren't you? Michael raised an eyebrow and glanced toward the crowded waiting room. Don't you see people are waiting? Michael Barmit, deputy head of Borsipa. Hearing that, Incheol couldn't help but speak up. Vice principal, there's still 10 minutes before the supplementary exam starts. He immediately cut in. It's not a matter of time but of attitude. Michael's voice grew low. I'll have to warn him about this. Sehun felt briefly embarrassed and sighed inwardly. Not only is the refining department in bad shape, but is he also at odds with his superiors? Sehun's gaze shifted to Incheol. Now I understand why he recommended another student. As he continued to glance around, Hans turned to look with undisguised anger. His eyes stopped on Sehun and scanned him from head to toe. Seeing that, Sehun froze for a moment and his arm dropped instinctively. After a brief hesitation, Sehun slowly spoke. Very pleased to meet you. Attempting to respond to Hans's scornful attitude, he smiled awkwardly. What's with this brat and his half-baked reputation? It's been a long time since I've been treated like this. How boring, unbelievable. At that moment, a voice rang out, drawing everyone's attention. Has everyone gathered? Immediately after, a figure appeared in the glaring sunlight. Seeing that, Sehun and Hans both turned around. On this side, Michael exhaled. We were wondering when you'd arrive, headmaster. At the same time, Sehun's eyes widened as he saw the other person. It was. Unha immediately sat down, eye to eye with Sehun. She stared at him with a frosty gaze and said in a low voice, I'm sorry for being late. Ryu Unha, head of Borsippa at Babel. Upon seeing her, Sehun couldn't help feeling a bit unsettled. Why is she here? The moment he saw Unha, Sehun was stunned. His expression darkened as if looking at a distant memory. We'd heard rumors that she used to work at Babel, thinking that only made him more uneasy. Who would have thought she'd take the headmaster's chair? The S-rank hero who devours weapons? Ryu Unha. A superhuman whose unique ability increases strength by absorbing armaments. Before I reverse time, she was merely a regular customer who often visited my shop. Long after that, Unha appeared disheveled. Her voice softened and her eyes curved as if smiling, though deep down they hid an unreadable remorse. I truly regret having accidentally consumed your weapon. Meanwhile, Sehun stood motionless. He did not respond to Unha. Then the space fell silent and she lowered her head. On his side, Sehun wore an angry expression. Teeth clenched so hard his body trembled. In the end, he could only helplessly bow his head. Back in the present, a short but firm call pulled him from his thoughts. Hoon, Sehun. Sehun snapped back to attention and replied quickly, yes. Incheol's voice steadied as his gaze swept over the candidates. We'll begin by explaining the exam. Everyone, pay attention. He emphasized each word with a gruff tone. You will have a total of 90 minutes to complete this test. Incheol paused briefly, then continued. During those 90 minutes, your task is to forge an item that can interface with the sword from the previous exam. Incheol suddenly stopped for a few seconds, creating a heavy silence, but his voice grew colder, each word ringing like an order. You are only allowed to use alchemical forging techniques to craft it. Incheol tilted his head toward the shimmering or racks regarding materials. You are free to choose any or available here. Incheol's voice lowered. His gaze swept over the two examiners with respect. The finished pieces will be personally judged by Headmaster Unha and Vice Principal Michael. So pour your heart into creating something you can be proud of. He then decisively lowered his hand. His voice rang out like a bell opening the contest. Very well. Standing before the two of them were Sehun and Hans. Incheol shouted. The exam officially begins. After a moment, Sehun murmured under his breath. Only allowed to use alchemical forging? Sehun pressed his lips for a moment, eyes fixed on the pile of materials. He must create resonance with pure magic to prevent the primordial spirit power from erupting. Hans let out a cold laugh. Do you think staring at that or pile will make your mana increase? Sehun slowly lifted his head, his gaze growing colder. Did I mishear? Sehun asked curiously. Were you aiming that remark at me to mock me? Hans smirked. Who else is here but us? Just then Incheol's voice rang out coldly. Hans Barmit, refrain from making statements unrelated to the exam. He heard that and bowed his head slightly. I'll be more careful.
Sehun was briefly stunned. Hans Barmut?
What the hell? This guy turns out to be the son of an examiner, Michael Barmit, Hans Barmit. Thinking that, Sehun grinned wickedly. No wonder they look so alike. Sehun turned to look at him with a resentful attitude. The more he thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed. Hans thought to himself that it looked like the other had noticed. He curled his lip in a sneer. That I am the precious son of the vice principal. You're just a commoner with low status and the weakest mana among the candidates. I was born into the renowned Barmit family, famed for alchemical forging, and I possess magical power comparable to the top graduate of the second year. The outcome of this match was already determined from the start. Unha watched their every move, smiling faintly. Lazurite and Hainam Jade. Both are materials that contain enormous mana reserves. Moreover, they are primordial ores imbued with water element spirit power. At this, Incheol continued in a low tone. Water element mana is highly averse to fire, making forging them extremely difficult. Michael curled his lips. That's old news. Modern alchemical forging techniques have advanced far beyond the past. Seeing his arrogant expression, Incheol interjected. Indeed, alchemical forging isn't constrained by space or circumstance, but crafting time varies with the practitioner and/or type. Thus, under today's conditions, it should only take 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Michael continued to grin with a chilling malice, lowering his voice. Hans can synthesize any ore in just half an hour. A few days ago, Hans spun a crystal with spirit power. Incheol couldn't help feeling unsettled. Synthesize a resonance in only 30 minutes? He involuntarily shivered. What if his skill has reached the level to complete a resonance synthesis in 30 minutes? Then he's far beyond the second-year students, let alone a freshman. Incheol's gaze passed over him, suspicion growing. So they tightened the time to forge the magic stone, prepared abundant materials in advance, and imposed the alchemical forging method. They intentionally chose a test topic that absolutely benefits Hans, who had already excelled in alchemical forging. Incheol's eyes lingered on his face. Michael was as cunning as a venomous snake. After a moment of silence, Sehun exhaled softly. This will do. Unha looked at him with curiosity, unable to hide some surprise. That is, the group's gazes fixed on him. Hydrate stone and crimson firestone. Michael frowned slightly, clearly sensing unstable fluctuations from those two mineral blocks. They were fire element versions of lazurite and Hainam jade with sky-high mana concentrations. He coldly muttered that he didn't know what skills the kid had. But his ego was certainly huge. On the other side, Hans involuntarily glanced at Sehun. He squinted at Sehun's pile of materials. Did he deliberately choose ores that directly contrasted with his own? Thinking that, Hans chuckled. What a fool. Don't even dream of controlling the crimson firestone with your measly mana. He smiled faintly, his gaze dropped. This looks even easier than I thought. Suddenly Hans's expression changed. Back toward Sehun, the system announced. The Covenant engraving skill has been activated. The system chimed dryly. Magical light surrounded his body. Covenant engraving harmony was active. Covenant engraving allows the user to slot Covenant stones into available equipment positions. Left hand, the right hand was equipping the Ironfire talisman on the right arm. Then a flame slowly descended. Sehun's arm was seen engulfed by the flame. Witnessing that, Hans gritted his teeth. That guy. What useless little tricks is he using? Meanwhile, he continued to focus on activating the metal blocks. The iron ores began to spin around one another. Seeing this, Sehun smirked. A spark of blazing light flashed in his eyes. At the same time, Unha's group kept staring at him. On this side, Michael raised an eyebrow. Is he trying to create resonance by using the same attribute as the minerals? How foolish. The basic principle is to use pure mana to make primordial minerals resonate with each other. He silently judged that if they forced it that way, sooner or later the magical elements would explode out of control. Thinking that, Michael sneered. The idiot, surely he's about to cause an accident. Then suddenly Sehun swung his arm forward. A layer of scales was seen covering his arm. Silence fell over the space. Sehun held his pose. Witnessing it, Incheol and Unha hastily bowed their heads. Meanwhile, Michael's eyes widened. What is this terrifying firepower? At that moment, a sword formed. The instant they saw it, Sehun barely moved his lips. The system's voice immediately reached his ear. Ironfire talisman unequipped. Equipment processing complete. Congratulations. You have successfully crafted the Ironfire sword casing. Faced with the horrifying sight, Unha's eyes rounded in astonishment. Michael was so shocked his whole body froze. He couldn't help feeling a bit unsettled. Impossible, he actually succeeded? The system screen flashed. Ironfire sword casing. Rarity. Rare, low quality. A sword casing infused with concentrated fire element mana, capable of storing and amplifying flame-attributed spirit power, allowing the use of the special skill Inferno. At the same time, cold sweat trickled down Hans's temples. He had finished the synthesis phase already? How was his speed even possible? He stared blankly at his palm, his mind screaming that this was utterly absurd. Those magical elements should have erupted. Thinking this, Hans grew even more unsettled. Had he misunderstood something? Just then, Michael flinched. he urgently shouted, "Wait, stop right now. If you dare to feed primordial spirit power into those magic stones." The sphere in Hans's hand began to shake violently. His vision was suddenly obscured by heat, and then the orb suddenly exploded. Shards flew everywhere. A loud blast rang out and the space trembled in waves. That afternoon, in the refining department's examination hall, the scene cut to a room where crystal fragments lay scattered across the floor. On the other side, Hans appeared with a scratched face. After a moment of silence, Incheol hesitated to speak. Normally, after a thorough evaluation, he paused for a beat, teeth clenched as if swallowing undisguisable anger. One of the two will be nominated as the department valedictorian. Saying that, Incheol lifted his head and looked straight at Hans. However, it's unfortunate that, in that moment, he recoiled, clutching his bleeding arm. Incheol's gaze rested on Hans and went on. Unexpectedly, the exam ended with one side forced to withdraw. At the same time, Michael ground his teeth. Though annoyed, he tried to keep a calm tone. Since a student was injured during the test, the best course is to cancel the results and schedule a retest. Hearing this, Incheol spun around and objected sternly. "We have no right to overturn the result of a completed exam. After all, didn't that accident arise from Hans's carelessness?" He tilted his head, eyes like knives glancing at Incheol. In a chilling tone, "Professor Kim, it seems you care more about scores than your students' safety? Huh?" As soon as the words finished, he fell silent, a flash of anger crossing his face. At this, Michael stood and leisurely continued. "Let's not talk about that now." Michael walked slowly to the center of the hall. His gaze bore into Sehun as if trying to strip away his secret. The fastest resonance speed ever recorded in academia was 5 minutes. Yet, raising his voice almost to a shout, "Can you see any plausibility in a freshman who just arrived transporting mana and achieving instantaneous resonance?" The original nature of alchemical forging was a technique developed to craft weapons by mana alone in situations where normal forging was impossible. Therefore, the core of alchemical forging is not the traditional hammer and anvil method of subduing or by the forger's life, but to return to the mineral core's origins and awaken the latent life within it. That is the true essence of alchemical forging. In that moment, Sehun had only one thought. What I just did proves exactly that, and it's the answer smiths will find after countless failed experiments. It's a simple method that will become standard in a few years, so I have no reason to hide it. But I'm not going to waste time teaching a stubborn old man who only yells and won't listen. Finally, he said coolly, "I really don't understand what nonsense you're spouting." Hearing that, Michael sneered as predicted. "You use cheating tricks." He gave a cold, contemptuous laugh. "A worthless rookie forged a rare-grade piece of equipment? If you intended to cheat, at least do it in a slightly more plausible way." Sehun frowned, his eyes darkening at the insult but his voice restrained. "What are you talking about?" Just then, a voice cut into the tense conversation. "That's right. This is truly absurd." Michael bowed his head low, but the corner of his mouth curled with calculation. "I knew it. You'll surely understand this principle. Indeed, it's ludicrous. We should strip Lee Sehun of his right to compete for cheating and hold a retest." Meanwhile, she walked past him as if nothing had happened. Unha stopped before his sword. Incheol watched her in bewilderment. "Principal." Unha carefully grasped the sword. A whisper escaped. "Unbelievable." Saliva drooled from Unha's mouth. Then suddenly she pointed at Sehun. "Student Lee Sehun." Unha unexpectedly made a request, eyes shining like a child finding treasure. "Let me bite it once." "No. Just lick it. Can I taste it one time?" At those words, Michael was nearly dumbstruck, a look of bewilderment flashing across his face. Meanwhile, Incheol stared at her in amazement. "Lick it." Suddenly, Unha's stomach made a rumbling sound. At that, the whole group nearly froze. That late afternoon, in the city center, Sehun was nonchalantly leaving the academy. He stood beneath the blazing sunset, thinking that his final fine-tuning was still rather immature and the level of completion hadn't reached the ultimate realm. Thinking that, Sehun tried to reassure himself. Still, he smiled softly. His hair swayed in the evening breeze, his face betraying hidden delight at seeing Deputy Principal Barmett trembling with anger. A passerby eyed Sehun warily and whispered to his friend, "He looks creepy when he laughs." The friend urged quickly. He's strange. Don't look at them, just move on. Turning back to Sehun, he suddenly froze. Wait, now that I think about it, Barmit. That name sounds familiar, but I can't place where I've met him. Sehun smacked his forehead frantically and kept mumbling, Barmit, Barmit, Barmit. Images from a past life suddenly surfaced. Louise whispered angrily that back in Babel. The cheap weapons she bought after doing the hard labor under that bastard's orders unexpectedly exploded. Then she suddenly shouted, voice full of resentment. That's why I was burned by Mana and ended up in such a miserable state. Damn him, if not for that man, across from her. Sehun only looked at Louise with a cold stare. Back in reality, his steps halted. A dreadful thought flashed through Sehun's mind. The name of the smith who permanently disabled the brawler Louise Vallant was Barmit. Could Michael Barmit be that man? At the thought he frowned slightly. My top objective in this life was to quickly approach and reform the three dogs, but with the brawler, that may no longer be necessary. Sehun curled his lips in a cold smile. His gaze turned vicious. A thought crossed his mind. If I just stop Michael Barmit's abuses, Louise will never go astray. In an instant, the scene shifted to the refining department's meeting room. Inside came angry shouts. Do you intend to make student Sehun our department valedictorian? A representative spoke up, voice slow but laced with doubt. Professors from other departments chimed in. Are you serious about this decision? Those beside him hesitated. Even if that's your intention, this seems a bit extreme. Unha slowly set both hands on the table, her calm gaze sweeping over each face. In a low but resonant voice she asked, does anyone here object? An elderly professor gently shook his head, eyes showing some reserve, his tone conciliatory. Not exactly. Before anyone could oppose, Michael interjected. This reads more like sincere advice. He continued at ease. After all, Principal, you've only been in office a short time. Hearing this, Unha's expression shifted. It was an undisguised anger. Another person added. Yes, we admit his equipment is impressive, but perhaps we need to reevaluate more thoroughly. In Cheol cut in Professors, you say that because you haven't seen Lee Sehun's fire-infused sword casing with your own eyes. His craftsmanship may be rough, but if you look at how the mana operates and its compatibility with the five-colored flame blade, one among them couldn't help but exclaim. Truly astonishing, yet to be honest I'm still concerned about its practical viability. At the same time Unha spoke. This weapon has likely only reached under 60% of the completion Lee Sehun desired, and paradoxically that deficiency reveals its tremendous potential. She emphasized each word. After witnessing, the room seemed to freeze as Unha continued slowly, each word falling like a hammer. If after seeing the upcoming demonstration by valedictorian Lee Sehun, you still cannot accept my decision, then I will immediately resign from my post as principal. In the vast plaza, Ludwig's voice echoed from the sound-amplifying magic, long and solemn like an ancient oath. 54 years ago the heavens bestowed the hero's tower in response to humanity's evolution. The atmosphere fell as an illusion reconstructed, a sky split open. His tone grew heavier. In reply, hell released the chaotic mire that rotted all life. As we find new opportunities to pursue, a colossal catastrophe also descends. Standing at the center of the great hall, Ludwig lectured earnestly in a powerful voice. Babel itself was formed amid those turbulent currents. This academy is the largest in history, built in the heart of the Pacific, even to this day. Babel has produced countless outstanding heroes. Saying this, he solemnly named an exemplar. The ascended emperor, Lord Ludwig Schubert. And you too will become part of them. Ludwig's voice grew earnest. Step forward, all who have set foot in Babel Academy. His tone rose, solemn and sacred like a battlefield vow. That is the noble mission of a hero. The speaker was the ascended Emperor Louis Singh. Sehun stood motionless amid the crowd. He watched Ludwig on the podium with calculating quietude. Observed up close, the man seemed kind, though in truth he was not purely a gentle old man. The host stepped forward, raising the microphone. Next we will present the performances of this year's top valedictorians. Invited to the stage, the top students from each department ascended in order, males and females alike. Sehun watched the proud backs walk up. His expression darkened as memories of his past life flickered by. Department valedictorians, last life I wondered why so many grew arrogant merely from high academy standings. At that moment the host cried out, "Now we will begin the skill demonstrations." He glanced around and forced a smile at the corner of his mouth. Seeing this, it seems I understand the issue. At the same time the host announced loudly, "The demonstration sample to be used today is none other than this masterpiece, ladies and gentlemen." As soon as the words finished, Automaton Model 9 appeared. The moment he saw it, he excitedly introduced, "A golem from the factory Automaton Model 9. It even possesses combat capability comparable to a C-rank hero. Over here." Sehun's gaze fixed on Automaton Model 9. He smiled lightly with interest. "A combat-dedicated automaton. Then, since it isn't equipped with any specific weapons, it'll probably use martial arts." The host reached toward the arena entrance. The opening act will be the representative from the combat department, his voice ringing with drama. The performance will be carried out by the valedictorian of Akarkuf, Jake Myers. Shortly after, Jake Myers appeared on the stage along with Automaton Model 9. Sehun narrowed his eyes as he watched the dark-haired youth step out. If he's Jake, I think he's the third son of the Myers family. Rumor has it he's eccentric in his pursuit of martial arts despite being born into a family famed for swordsmanship. Seems the rumor is true. Just then the host shouted, "Then we will begin immediately." On the opposite side, the automaton's eyes lit up. That was also the moment he signaled, "Start the match now." No sooner had he spoken than it spun its toes hard against the ground. The automaton lunged toward Jake like a whirlwind. It immediately delivered a punch. Jake instantly twisted his body to dodge. Meanwhile, the automaton frantically swung its fists at him. Afterward, Jake leaped down, toes skimming the ground. He looked up at it. "Now it's my turn to show what I can do." Saying that, Jake hesitated briefly, then charged straight at the automaton. You could see him clench his fists. He immediately struck a punch directly into its body. Witnessing that scene, the students were almost stunned into silence. On his side, Jake continued to attack the automaton relentlessly. Sehun widened his eyes, seeing that terrifying burst of speed. "What is this? I clearly remember he died young while at A rank in his mid-20s, thinking that, he couldn't help but feel unsettled. With this level, he should be the once-in-a-decade genius at Babel." Sehun murmured inwardly in doubt. Why in the previous life did he only reach a rank? Back to Jake. He curled his lips into a cold smile. With just this, in the final moment he swung his arm to finish the fight with the automaton. Its head rang through the air and then fell to the ground. Jake sheathed his weapon. Standing upright amid the dissipating dust, he exhaled softly. "It's been a long time since I've moved this freely." The host's voice trembled for a moment. "Truly?" Then he nearly shouted with excitement. "What a dazzling, wonderful performance. Student Jake." He defeated an automaton with the strength of a C-rank hero in a single breath. The host turned back to Jake, unable to hide his admiration. "Indeed, the valedictorian of Akarkuf is on another level." Over here Sehun frowned slightly, thinking to himself, he really made a huge impact right from the start. The next performer will certainly be under heavy pressure. The announcer's voice rang out again, this time with a different tone, calm and dignified. "Next in the program, please welcome the valedictorian of the UR support department. The performer will be student Inoue Erika." He raised an eyebrow as the long black-haired girl stepped out. "So she's the valedictorian of UR. Pressure? Nothing to worry about at all." Erika, the eldest daughter of the Inoue family, one of Japan's 3 most illustrious clans. She wasn't a conqueror of the summit, but she built a reputation as an S-rank hero wielding a mythic-grade weapon. Yet in the end she was corrupted into a fiend and slain by her own kin. At this, Sehun silently decided that since her future would be eroded into monstrosity, forming an alliance would bring him no benefit. Then suddenly Erika turned and looked toward him. Seeing that, Sehun froze for a moment, staring at her in bewilderment. He watched Erika's footsteps with innocent amazement, his heart tangled like threads. What was that? Did she just look at me? At the same time, the host announced sternly that the automaton used for this performance was Model 9 equipped with armor, boasting defensive capability 1.5 times superior to the previous version. He shouted excitedly, shaking the space. Let's see what surprises student Inoue Erika will bring. Then suddenly Erika produced a crow. Her eyes flared with a demon-like light. She murmured a command under her breath. Advance. No sooner had she spoken than the crow flew straight out. It shot up into the air and began circling the automaton. Faced with the unexpected sight, Sehun was briefly unsettled. Just a crow? At the same time, the automaton looked up to follow it. Its eyes suddenly glowed a sinister red. On his side, he watched the automaton intently. He judged inwardly that the automaton had shifted into full defensive mode. It would be very difficult to penetrate such a sturdy defense, especially since it's a defense-specialized model. Turning back to Erika, the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. Suddenly the crow spread its wings wide. Its legs extended, revealing sharp talons. One of the crow's eyes also gleamed with a green light. Under the sunlight, it stretched its wings fully. Then suddenly the crow accelerated and dove straight at the automaton. Below, the whole area plunged into chaos as dust and dirt flew everywhere. Witnessing the scene, Sehun was nearly stunned. On that side, cracks appeared across the automaton's body and electrical energy burst outward. A hole had formed in its body before anyone noticed. Immediately, the automaton's torso collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Erika beckoned and the crow returned. The host once more erupted in cheers. Astonishing, truly extraordinary. With a single strike, the armored automaton fell. She pierced an opponent with C-rank strength. The crowd cheered happily. Erika is amazing. Turning back to Sehun, he forced a smile. With the atmosphere so boiling, he felt he'd be booed if he merely showcased a weapon and finished. Just then the host shouted, "And finally, the valedictorian of Borsippa Technology. Please welcome student Lee Sehun." At that moment the host enthusiastically introduced. Continuing the program, we'll begin the performance of Borsippa Technology's valedictorian, student Lee Sehun. In another scene, performance supervisor 1, Ludwig Schubert, was watching the matches via screen. He couldn't help but chuckle softly. This batch of valedictorians is truly impressive. How long has it been since we've seen a valedictorian from the refining department? Saying that, he felt some worry. Would the pressure be too much for that young man? Beside him sat performance supervisor 2, Principal Ryu Unha, who affirmed confidently that no problems would arise. The stands buzzed as Sehun stepped into the light. The host smiled enigmatically. Will he deliver a performance that outshines Jake and Erika? Someone sighed in admiration. He's so handsome. The host suddenly grew curious. Is that a rare-grade equipment? That's unusual for the refining department. A female student squealed excitedly. At the same time, Sehun decisively drew the sword from its scabbard. He swung the sword sharply to one side, his gaze fixed on the opponent. In that instant, an image of the sword appeared behind Sehun along with countless functions. A male student spoke up, half admiring, half skeptical. Indeed, it's miraculous for a freshman to craft a rare-grade item. The student beside him hesitated, but compared to other departments it still seemed to lack a breakthrough. Rustling murmurs spread as some students showed disappointment. A rare-grade item that looks a bit plain. After all the previous departments have already put on such flashy displays, the male student couldn't help feeling puzzled. I don't know what he plans to show in this performance. I really want to know. In a corner of the stands, Michael curled his lips. His eyes glittered with ambition. Fate has sided with me. He stared wickedly at the Borsippa seat. This time the principalship will surely be mine. In contrast to Michael, Unha's face was calm as the sea. Back in the stands the host quickly announced. To serve this performance, Model 10 with strength on par with a D-rank hero. He suddenly cut himself off. No, Sehun looked up, his eyes flashing like a blade leaving its sheath. His words silenced the plaza. Switch to Model 8 and please equip it with armor. The host nearly dropped the roster in his hand, stammering in shock. Huh? What is he requesting? Model 8 can sometimes withstand attacks from a B-rank hero, and he still asks for it to be fitted with armor? He hesitated for a moment. The host continued reluctantly. It's hard to prepare that request instantly. He thought inwardly. Are you trying to ruin the performance? At that moment, Incheol spoke up. I've arranged everything beforehand. A metallic entity suddenly appeared at the sound of his voice. He looked up toward the automaton. The automaton was now fully armored. Seeing that, the host was momentarily stunned. He'd prepared it in advance? He worriedly scanned around, his tone faltering. If you're that determined. At the same time, Sehun turned to look at In Sheol. He was silent, his eyes expectant as they rested on him. From the honorary stands the host shouted excitedly. Then go all out. He forced a smile. Now even I don't know what will happen in this match. The host then loudly called for the start. As soon as the battle bell rang, In Sheol tensed. In that moment he whispered, make some chaos. Sehun smirked. All right. He glanced toward the stands where In Sheol watched, a hint of a smile in his eyes. I should live up to his expectations a bit. The sword in his hand emitted a fierce spiritual aura. Sehun gently bowed, and the energy coiled into a circle. Witnessing that, Jake cheered in excitement. That's crazy. At the same time, Hans curled his lip in contempt. All show, no real strength. What can someone lacking mana possibly accomplish? The streams of flame within the five-colored flame sword inherently conflict with one another. That explosion could spell disaster for the wielder if not controlled by an enormous reserve of mana. However, by utilizing the flame storage capacity of the fire-accumulating scabbard and the technique of channeling chainfire inward, Sehun murmured, the charging process is complete. Opposite him, the automaton had activated its shield layer. Meanwhile, he swung the sword forcefully, igniting the flame. The move just executed made the entire stance real. A thought formed in Sehun's mind. If I trigger a blaze now, the flame spirits compressed inside will. His gaze fixed on the automaton's protective screen. Sehun murmured at the decisive moment. Detonate simultaneously. In the stands, Michael's face went pale, as if he sensed something amiss. The host stood gaping in astonishment. What the hell is this madman trying to do? After a while, the thick dust gradually cleared away. Sehun slowly sheathed the sword. Then he breathed out in short, ragged gasps. When it was over, Sehun scanned the gouge across the arena, wondering if he'd gone a bit too far. Sensing the emergency, the host grew urgent. The technical support team should get to the central hall immediately. He hastily declared that with that performance, the competition was over. After a while, the click of high heels echoed throughout the great hall. Inside, Sehun wore an embarrassed expression. Upon seeing him, Unha bowed slightly. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting after calling you here. I had to help clear the wreckage in the arena. Sehun scratched his head awkwardly. Please don't worry. I'm the one who should apologize. I'm sorry for causing that scene in the central hall. He suddenly lowered his voice. I should have controlled my power a bit better. She looked puzzled. What are you saying, Student Sehun? He asked in confusion. Did you call me here to scold me? Unha immediately denied it. Of course not. No, the real reason we invited you here is... Just then, her stomach rumbled again. The strange sound made Sehun pause for a moment. She cleared her throat softly to hide her embarrassment. Finally she made an offer. I'm willing to pay 10 times the market price. Unha looked him straight in the eye with determination. Would you agree to transfer the five-colored flame sword and the fire-accumulating scabbard to me? He widened his eyes for a moment at the words. What? At that instant, the bond with Unha was established. Unha suddenly leaned forward, speaking in a coaxing tone. It's truly an amazing set of equipment. The system screen suddenly lit up before Sehun. A contract with the entity Ruha had been established. The contract level with the creator Sehun is now level 1. His eyes widened, his pupils trembling with astonishment. So fast? In my previous life, I had to give her weapons many times before this bond formed. Sehun responded awkwardly. Thank you, sir. He reassured himself silently. In any case, this is a stroke of good luck. Lines of mana characters appeared before his eyes. The system voice echoed steadily. Performing contract extraction, the announcement tone grew more solemn as if proclaiming a rare treasure. Proceeding to take the contract from target Ryu Unha. Contract. Voracious iron, high grade, supreme quality. A type of iron that generates heat by consuming other metals. It will corrode any iron material it touches and absorb the core into itself, absorbing iron to create mineral blood. Sehun stared blankly at the object before him. So it's done. Just then Unha leaned forward again. You're going to sell that item to me, right? He immediately shook his head. No, absolutely not. At this, she raised an eyebrow. But you just said it was done. Suddenly a voice came from outside. Principal, this is Kim in Cheol. He looked up. His voice was clearly formal, as if delivering an urgent command. The academy principal announces the award ceremony will proceed immediately. In Cheol turned to Sehun. May I take student Sehun with me? She nodded slightly, her gaze as deep and still as a night lake. I understand. Sehun quickly stepped back outside. He glanced back furtively. See you later, sir. On her side, Unha's stomach continued to complain. The place considered the heart of Babel Academy. The main glass-domed building, the Marduic Manor, the scene shifted into the manor. Sehun hurriedly followed in Cheol from behind. As they walked, he quietly reminded him, eyes sterner than usual. Be mindful of decorum in front of the academy principal. He won't just generously overlook that you wrecked the central hall during the demonstration. In Cheol paused briefly and continued. He is also someone of a completely different echelon than us. He gave a small smile, his expression unusually composed. You don't need to worry too much. Sehun quickly entered. Singh looked straight at the youth before him. You must be student Lee Sehun, the exalted emperor, Principal Ludwig. Before I reverse time, he was the hero who sacrificed himself fighting the world-devouring demon god alone, one of the 6 great demon gods. The deadly aura of that figure suddenly replayed in his memory. An exclamation rose within him. Truly a perfectionist. Ludwig then spoke. The weapons you displayed today are extremely interesting. He sighed softly. I can't say there's no regret, but I have very high expectations of you. Hearing this, Sehun froze in place. The regret in him rose like a smoldering fire in the forge. Though mentally prepared, he still felt like throwing the 5-colored flame sword and the fire-accumulating scabbard back into the furnace. Just then Ludwig made an offer. Therefore, to acknowledge your talent and effort, I will grant you 2 rewards, he asked solemnly. Tell me what you need. Sehun widened his eyes. For the first time, surprise showed on his ordinarily calm face. 2 rewards? He answered quickly, his voice clear and without hesitation. I wish the rewards could increase my mana pool and my memorization ability. As soon as he finished speaking, Ludwig raised his arm into the air. A sigil formed in the void between them. Sehun stared at the 2 treasures clad in oppressive darkness. Hero ranked, supreme quality. A shard emitting inky light falling from the night, bearing the property of devouring everything except darkness, capable of absorbing mana from anything that contacts the crystal. A dream ivory tusk, hero ranked, an ivory of a dream-eating species containing dream magic mana able to cross the boundary between reality and dream, helping connect to dreams by using dream magic mana. He wore a bewildered expression. The black inkstone is already precious, but the dream ivory tusk is even harder to find. Sehun smirked. It's a bit difficult to control right now, but I already have ideas for how to use them. He studied him for a long moment. His voice softened but remained weighty. Are you satisfied with them? Sehun bowed his head slightly in gratitude. They are truly wonderful, sir. No sooner had he left than a voice asked, What are you contemplating? The mirror spirit voiced its suspicion about only that boy receiving 2 rewards. This action doesn't resemble your usual style at all. Ludwig replied over the speaker. I gave them simply because the child has the capacity to assimilate them. Hearing the answer, it couldn't help but exclaim. Is that so? I always felt he was like an old man in a boy's body. He spoke in a low tone. That only proves his depth is so great that even you can perceive it. Ludwig watched Sehun's figure recede down the antique corridor. Moreover, even I cannot fully fathom the depths of that youth. The scene focused on the manor called Marduic. Inside the classroom, a group of male students continued to discuss. At that moment, a male student cheerfully approached Hans. Hans, where do you want to go for lunch? He refused at once without hesitation. Sorry, I already have plans with Senior Howard today. The student gaped in surprise. A date with the third-year valedictorian of the Borsippa department? Hans answered nonchalantly. It's just that our families are close, so we meet often. He said he'd give me some advice about life at the academy, so we're meeting. The boy stepped a bit closer. Then if it's okay, I can come along. Just then Sehun entered, casting a cold glance at Hans. The moment they saw Sehun, the classroom fell silent, his gaze fixed once more on Hans. Hans involuntarily felt a chill up his spine. What is with that weird look? Seeing this, Sehun curled his lip in a sneer. It seems he's begun to understand his place. Over here, Hans ground his teeth as his pride was bruised. Damn it, must I lose to such a lowlife? The classroom door burst open. Incheol strode in decisively, his stern gaze sweeping the room. Everyone, settle into your seats. He glanced around the classroom. All right, it seems everyone is present. Incheol turned his gaze to the class and continued. Since this is the first lesson, we'll begin with self-introductions. He introduced solemnly. This metal bar is a material called reflective alloy. It is tens of times more sensitive to mana than ordinary ores. Therefore, if you channel mana into it in this way, at this he emphasized each word, a weapon in your mind will be easily formed. At the same time Sehun stared at him with reverence. It's no coincidence he's listed among the world's top 100 artisans, but when checking the contract stone, I vaguely realized that this person truly is a genuine talent. Incheol paused. His voice deepened with philosophical weight. Due to its extreme sensitivity, it's difficult to use as a combat weapon, but it reflects traits from the subconscious, helping the user see themselves. He suddenly raised his voice. That is why we call equipment made from reflective alloy alternate egos. The department's self-introduction will be replaced by creating these alternate egos. At the last minute, Incheol reminded them the finished pieces will be displayed in the main building for a week. So do your best. The students responded in unison. Yes, sir. Sehun's gaze landed on a male student. He mused that this piece of reflective alloy must be worth well over 10 million won each. Typical Babel extravagance. Even their greetings are luxurious. At the same time, Hans flinched when he gripped the sword. Seeing that, he sighed endlessly. Unbelievable. Sehun turned and sighed in frustration. There's not a single person here with the most important talent. Just then Incheol spoke. Finally, please welcome Lee Sehun. He replied quickly, present, sir. Sehun thought to himself, I'm already the top graduate of the department anyway. There's no reason to hide my true ability now. A bold idea suddenly sprang to mind. If I'm doing this, then, Sehun's pupils flashed with ambitious fire. Should I go all out this once? Then suddenly a loud explosion erupted inside the classroom. At the same time, a male student sneered. There are really a lot of people gathering here. Must be the pull of Lee Sehun. He continued in a mocking, annoyed tone. It's laughable how they keep praising him as if he's on another level, when he's only a freshman. The student beside him agreed. Exactly. The male student leaned forward and nodded slightly. That's exactly what I was going to say. The two looked up toward the object as Incheol's words echoed. Although an abnormal incident occurred during forging when it absorbed 19 nearby presentation alloys, we assessed that this actually demonstrated student Lee Sehun's talent, so we decided to exhibit it as is. A male student snorted. A sarcastic voice rose among the murmuring crowd. That's surely just a coincidence caused by some skill. The student next to him jerked his chin toward the piece, eyes full of doubt and envy. Didn't that happen because he used too many presentation alloys at once? Another student interjected. It's been ages since we've had a top graduate from the refining department. Maybe they're trying to market him as a real genius. Just then Erica suddenly spoke up. I have a slightly different view. Jake stepped closer, curling his lip in a sneer. I agree with her. Jake's tone sharpened. It seems the number of presentation alloys there still isn't enough to fully showcase Lee Sehun's true potential. In another development, the hammer face came down hard. At that moment, Sehun's face broke out in cold sweat. The man lowered his voice, his eyes flashing with incredulous astonishment. Did you manage to time it then? Even now, there hasn't been a single error of 0.01 seconds. Assistant Ha looked at him in bewilderment. What more can we possibly teach a child this exceptional? He smiled slightly. Then let's just skip his part and be done with it, and signaled, anyone want to watch a demonstration? After a while, Assistant Ha announced, all right, class dismissed. Over here, Sehun's eyes remained fixed on the hammer. Then he stared intently at the metal shards on the table. Without hesitation, Sehun once more lifted the hammer high. Assistant Ha suddenly spoke up. Are you planning to smash it? He stopped, bowed politely, and greeted the assistant instructor. The man stepped closer and warned, we have to hand these items in after this forging class, so don't damage them. Sehun tilted his head slightly. We have to hand them in? Assistant Ha wore an exasperated look. Where do you think students would get the budget to operate? Babel provides support based on performance, specifically the number of weapons sold on the external market. He paused and thought, then asked, so precisely what are you dissatisfied with right now? Is it your physical condition or your mana reserves? Taken aback by the question, Sehun gave a small laugh. The biggest problem at the moment is my body. In that instant, complex thoughts stirred within him. To forge training tools I need to smith the Mac thatch, but I lack the endurance to perform that work. The assistant tilted his head, his tone suggestive as if offering a tempting shortcut. If that's truly necessary for forging. After a moment's thought, he proposed a solution. Wouldn't using enhancement talismans be faster than physical training? He couldn't help but laugh at that. I never even considered that option. It's what I always avoided before I reversed time. Sehun's mouth lifted as if he'd found a new path. Since I returned to the past and now have stamina issues, I could smith the Mac thatch while under the effect of enhancement talismans. He bowed his head slightly. Thank you very much for the helpful advice. Assistant Ha shook his head softly. It's nothing. Then Sehun looked up, his gaze dropping to the sword in his hands as he continued the casting. He reminded him not to use more mana than necessary. Reduce it to about 70% of the current level, and focus your strikes on a single point instead. Before leaving, Sehun affirmed confidently that doing so would yield better results for him right now. He forced a smile at that. A freshman just instructed the assistant instructor? Then Assistant Ha turned and looked toward the hammer. At that moment, the atmosphere grew increasingly heated. Babel always encourages proactive self-study by each individual student. The system's voice rang out. The doors are opening, and the instructors' voices continue to carry. You have the right to enroll in classes from other specialties or even take dozens of courses in a single term. However, you must complete all your major courses, and if you accumulate 3 failing grades, you will be expelled immediately. Everything is completely free, but you must take responsibility for your choices. The announcement broadcast continued. Next stop, you are the district for the School of Magic. At that moment, Sehun casually stepped off the tram. As he looked up, Erica suddenly appeared. A male student blocked the way, his voice provocative. Hey, don't stand in the aisle. Move aside. Sehun furrowed his brow. Who are these people, barging in out of nowhere to cause trouble? He warned loudly. You're the ones who should move. At that, the male student's body trembled with anger as Erica stepped closer. She asked curiously, where are you headed? Taken aback by Erica's sudden action, the male student blinked in surprise. Sehun replied honestly, to the School of Magic. I was wondering if there are any elective courses I could register for. On that, she decisively offered. Then let me guide you. He hurriedly interjected. Miss Erica, the meeting is about to start. She curtly responded. You all can go on without me. The male student appeared anxious. But the seniors said they really wanted you to attend. Erica glanced coldly, her voice calm but not permitting contradiction. I'm not interested. Turning back to Sehun, his gaze remained unwavering. The two quickly walked away despite the male student calling out, Miss Erica. And as the space grew quiet, Erica looked at him, her expression noticeably more serious. Precisely what kind of elective are you searching for? Sehun replied slowly, I'm trying to learn more about enhancement talismans. She pressed on, specifically what kind of enhancement effect? He answered calmly. Something that can boost physical ability but must not interfere with the forging process. Upon hearing that, Erica suggested, then try a barrier spell. Sehun froze. A barrier spell? Isn't that kind of magic usually used only for defense? She explained slowly. It can take many forms depending on how you use it. Erica pulled a thin sheet of paper from her pocket. Making a gesture, I'll give an example. She brought the paper toward him. Try tearing this paper. Sehun took it and felt a thin layer of mana coating the surface. He was briefly surprised. Did she just increase its durability? No, not exactly. It retains its original properties but will automatically become much stiffer when struck by a strong external force. Sehun stared at the scrap of paper. Analyzing, the technique is exceptionally suited to forging because it requires extremely precise control. Erica gave a faint chuckle. For complex applications like this, you'll probably need a professor's help. He looked at the paper with naive curiosity, a doubt forming. Hey, this spell formula looks very familiar. Meanwhile, she went on at length, the professor who teaches barrier structure married into a branch of my family. So I can introduce you to him directly if you want. At that, Erica raised her voice slightly to continue. Then suddenly Sehun cried out. That's it. The paper tore instantly. Seeing that, she couldn't help but feel a little unsettled. You were able to grasp my family's barrier technique in such a short time, and even dispel it already? That morning at UR University's School of Magic, Sehun's presence beside her in the campus center stunned everyone, becoming the focus of curious stares and endless whispers. Why is Erica with a student from another faculty? I think I saw them together yesterday too. If I recall correctly, they also appeared together at the exhibition. Amid the staring eyes and murmurs echoing across the campus, he could only sigh in resignation. Rumors spread fast. Why do people like meddling in others' business? It's ridiculous. If Erica truly had feelings for me, there would already be a connection between us. Anyway, I wonder what criteria they use to select students for the class. I registered for this course, yet they require an entrance test first. Erica immediately announced, "This is the location for the barrier structure exam." Sehun began scanning the area and asked doubtfully, "This forest?" The other candidates kept cursing in annoyance. Damn it, what backwater village is this located in? He quietly observed the forest before him and thought, are we playing a treasure hunt for this exam? This is getting troublesome. Could they have hidden something with a barrier or... Sehun accidentally stomped on a strange spot, causing the barrier around the forest to shatter instantly. The moment the barrier shattered beneath Sehun's feet, the assistant instructor immediately appeared and announced clearly, "You've passed the test." He was so shocked he could only blurt out in astonishment. What? Robert looked up at the assistant standing by the desk with a skeptical expression. Does that young lady really take an interest in our department's valedictorian? Professor Robert Perry, specialist in barrier structure at UR's School of Magic. He held his phone up to him and replied, "That's right. Look at this list." As he glanced at the list on the assistant's phone, he muttered in disbelief. I'm also puzzled that she suddenly applied for such a basic class. Thanks to her pull, the number of applicants tripled, but I don't feel pleased about it. There was also a recommendation from the Inoue heir, so this year we added a test using the Maze of the Lost Soul. The Maze of the Lost Soul is a type of barrier that distorts the senses and disorients people. Though it's only a basic level barrier, someone completely ignorant of magic might not even detect its presence. Witnessing the scene, Robert was stunned, inwardly marveling as he realized the pupil's true ability. Even without the young lady lending a hand, he could break that maze by instinct alone. He announced clearly to the group, "All of you here have passed the first round. From now on we will sort classes via the second test." A student immediately raised his hand confidently. "May I go first?" That student mentally calculated that this was a golden chance to impress Erica. Robert nodded in approval. "Very well. The second test is simple. Use your mana to dismantle the active barrier before you. I will assess based on completion time, so be quick and accurate." The contest began. A barrier woven like a spider web with a spider at its center acting as the core. The spider will continually hide whenever it senses mana traveling along the threads. And as long as it exists, the network will keep regenerating itself. Faced with the barrier, the volunteer froze, tense calculations running through his mind. My mana isn't enough to encircle the entire magical structure by conventional means. If that's the case, I'll use speed to overwhelm it. He looked at the clock, then remarked sternly, 2 minutes 23 seconds. You need to focus more on understanding the barrier structure, though this result isn't terrible. The student glanced at the young lady hoping for encouragement, but Erica's face remained expressionless. still as a windless lake, so he could only bow his head in disappointment. "Thank you, Professor." Then Robert spoke decisively. "Next person, step up." After everyone has tried, he resignedly declared that all of you will start from the basic class. "Next is Erika Inoue's turn. Begin." She stepped forward with unusual calm. Erika merely raised a finger and touched the barrier. The entire barrier flared and shattered into 100 fragments, the space falling deathly silent. The surrounding students stood dazed with amazement. Murmurs swelled like waves. How could she be so astonishingly fast? She had parsed the entire formula and caused the barrier to collapse completely. This is truly the caliber of a valedictorian. Amid the unending praise, he stepped forward slowly, glancing at the stopwatch, then said coldly, 22 seconds, "Well done, but using the standard dismantling method you might have been 2 seconds faster." Unfazed by Robert's strictness, Erika bowed lightly and replied calmly, "I will remember that." He said no more, his sharp eyes flicking to the next candidate as a silent warning about his high standards. Then he called the name clearly. Finally, Lee Se-hun. Watching him step forward, Robert judged inwardly that he looked unremarkable. Let's see what his actual skill is. Instead of hastily casting spells or performing elaborate preparations, he calmly sat down right in front of the barrier. The students' murmurs grew louder. "What the hell is he doing? Doesn't he know the test is being timed?" Se-hun remained composed, his gaze steady as he carefully peeled apart each layer of the energy shield structure. This barrier shares many properties with Thatch, specifically the ability to self-repair and revert to its original state if the disturbance doesn't reach a certain threshold. So, to forge this kind of stone, a blacksmith must transmit all impulses simultaneously at an exact ratio. Robert finally lost his patience and strode forward to demand, "What on earth are you doing? Listen to me." Her voice cut in, "Leave him be." At Erika's authoritative request, he could only fall silent in helplessness. Robert said nothing further, pressing his lips together as he stepped back. In the absolute silence, Se-hun's mind continued working at full speed. "Then if I do it this way, can I retain the impulses accumulated inside the stone instead of it shattering or dissipating as usual?" The instant his finger touched the weak point, the entire barrier burst into fierce flames. Amid the thick atmosphere of shock, Se-hun spoke in a normal voice, casually as if finishing a trivial chore. "Done." Just like that, he thought to himself that he could forge Thatch now. Se-hun rose to his feet. He stepped over the scattered debris with indifference, as if its existence had never meant anything. With the barrier dissolved, he stood up decisively and walked off, ignoring all the stares around him. The assistant checked the clock and announced, "The time is 7 minutes 45 seconds. Robert watched Se-hun's retreating back in silence. He thought to himself that how long the student took didn't really matter. This time it took 7 minutes, but next time he met a similar barrier he'd surely destroy it in the blink of an eye. He hadn't merely broken the barrier. He devised a formula himself to nullify that magic. She watched his lone figure go, her eyes full of worry. Erika thought to herself that if his extraordinary forging skills were combined with magic, she truly feared what monstrous artifacts he might create. A letter arrived announcing, "We have received a request from first-year student Lee Se-hun to forge at an intermediate level using heroic-grade materials. According to Article 8 of the Forge Safety Regulations, anyone wishing to supervise should contact us." The instructor looked at the computer screen and wondered how many people would come this time. Suddenly messages kept pouring in, surprising him. Wow, people are responding fast. However, not a single person from Vice Principal Michael's faction applied. Rumor has it tensions over there are high because his son was pushed down to second place. So the rumor was true, the instructor began to calculate. Then it's time to start choosing people. He was so astonished he nearly stared out of his eyes. Reading a message that the principal would personally oversee Lee Se-hun's intermediate forging session. Suddenly Yuha appeared and called out, "Long time no see, student Lee Se-hun." He froze, deeply shocked. "So busy yet he personally came all the way here?" She replied nonchalantly as principal, "I came to verify your ability with my own eyes." Se-hun didn't look directly at Unha but replied softly, "If it has come to this, I'll have to devote all my effort to crafting." With that, he immediately began forging on the spot, the first step in forging Thatch. There are actually many methods to treat this stone, but the most difficult technique among them is the nightfall process. You must place the stone in a space of total darkness with no light and use mana to separate impurities from the ink-like stone. In this stage, a single small error in mana coordination will cause the stone to instantly solidify and become useless. It sounds simple, but in truth it's tantamount to restructuring matter itself. She remained utterly silent, observing each of Sehun's movements. While his hands moved rhythmically, Sehun's mind began calculating coldly. A quarter is the best limit I can reach. If I reduce it any further, its performance won't be sufficient. For the second step, he began to conjure a blazing red flame directly from his palm. That terrible heat enveloped the chunk of metal. The surrounding space started to twist with each breath Sehun took as he channeled mana through the deep red flame to filter out the appropriate portion of the fire force. This stabilized flame is called the roaming fire flow, and it has the property of maintaining the exact temperature it had the moment it formed. Third, he used a hammer wrapped in the roaming fire flow to strike the heavy ink stone. The key was not to pause until the deformation had diminished thanks to the flame's properties. Watching the blazing flame, Unha mused inwardly that even if he were immune to fire, it didn't mean he felt no pain. How much has he worn himself down? He hammered repeatedly with a strangely fervent zeal. While the hammer's blows echoed throughout the forge, Erica stood quietly in a secluded corner of the campus waiting for Sehun. Despite Sehun's self-forgetting zeal, she stood nearby looking rather uninterested. Unha yawned repeatedly, appearing sleepy. She stood there exhausted and listless. 4 hours of forging had passed. The properties of the ink stone, having absorbed the flame to its limit, were beginning to change. He exhaled in relief, thinking the deformation had stopped. He melted the processed ink stone down. Then he poured it into a mold he'd prepared beforehand. The weary, listless expression on Unha's face vanished, replaced by a look of astonishment. Casting, not forging? The properties will change because of the darkness deep within the mold. What on earth is he thinking? As Sehun was about to begin the fourth step, Unha suddenly intervened. Wait. Regardless of her sharp admonition, he did not stop. In Sehun's head there were only numbers and magical structures as he gradually slowed the transformations in the ink stone with a formula that broke the barrier, and formed a mana conduit within that brief interval. Just as the conduit shaped within the stone's fleeting change, everything abruptly fell silent. Revealed in Sehun's hands was the final product, a spider ink bracelet of deep, somber black. The instant the bracelet finished forming, a mechanical sound rang out, shattering the silence. A system notification suddenly appeared before him. The permanent item spider ink bracelet has been completed. To break prejudices, a bold challenge that spares no one is necessary. Although the material's potential hasn't been fully tapped, the blacksmith's forging skill merits, ranking these new capabilities as top tier. You have acquired the skill Black Soul Thread. Spider ink bracelet rare average quality. A bracelet forged from dense inkstone, it possesses the attribute of absorbing its wearer's mana. Its weight increases proportionally to the mana it absorbs and stores, and the wearer can use the ring burst skill. In the sudden hush, Sehun exhaled softly and said, Success. In the silence, Unha's hungry stomach let out a loud, unmistakable rumble, as if announcing itself to the world. He paused and glanced over with a puzzled look, while she blushed and hurriedly covered her stomach with her hand as if to hide the betraying noise. Sehun could only look up to the sky and sigh helplessly, as if witnessing a legend collapse before his eyes. Unha observed it and offered her subjective opinion. Could this be a resonance phenomenon? It's impressive and it looks simple. However, its power isn't particularly strong. If done properly, we could aim to create a set bonus effect. He kept a calm demeanor, presented the item to her, and said, I'm sorry I can't offer you a weapon while you're troubled because of me. I don't know if this will help, perhaps as a small palate pleaser, but at least please accept it. Sehun said no more, holding his position and looking toward Unha. She took the item from Sehun's hand and unexpectedly activated the unique skill, Soul Refiner. Unha tasted it lightly and immediately remarked, This is quite tasty. He blurted out, Really? She replied nonchalantly, Yeah, in a figurative sense, its flavor is like crispy fried scraps. Sehun thought inwardly with relief. Do I have a habit of crafting everything to Eunha's taste? Maybe it'll be easy to deepen my bond with her. He smiled faintly at Eunha and gently said, I'm glad you like it. She nodded approvingly and said of course, though she was a little regretful to be eating this while those other items lay before her. By the way, when do you plan to deal with the 5-colored blade and the fire-accumulating scabbard? Sehun shook his head slightly, his gaze still calm as he answered, I have no intention of selling them right now. Eunha paused, puzzled and a little impatient, and pressed. Sorry, what do you mean? Is the price not high enough? He replied calmly, I'll keep them to prepare for the conquest class. Sehun smiled inwardly and thought furthermore. They say hunger is the greatest seasoning. He nodded slightly as a promise and said that once he had suitable gear to give her, he'd let her know first. She blushed, brushed off her embarrassment to regain composure, and said she'd look forward to it. Is the forging completely finished then? He replied, yes it is. Eunha then spoke up to remind him, then let's head out, the staff will come to clean up. Sehun rasped, thankfully, because I have no strength left to clean. As he was walking, he suddenly felt dizzy and fell backward. She hastily caught Sehun. Eunha asked anxiously if he was all right. He calmed himself and answered, yes. I'm fine. Perhaps I misallocated my stamina a bit. She offered to escort me back to the dormitory. Are you afraid of heights, perhaps?
Sehun answered decisively, no.
Immediately Eunha scooped him up in a princess carry before he could react. She planted a foot to push off. Eunha shot forward like a lightning bolt through the air. While still carrying him, Eunha circulated mana and thought to herself, could the mold I absorbed really draw out so much power? As she bore him and dashed through the sky at terrifying speed, Sehun could only resign himself helplessly, thinking that in many ways the situation had changed a lot compared to before he went back in time. At that moment Erica was still patiently standing on the campus grounds waiting for him. Lee Sehun still hasn't shown up? I need to give him this invitation. On the Babel Academy Metallurgy Department's free forum, an anonymous user posted a photo of Erica and raised the question, why is she appearing here? Isn't she the top entrant of the combat department? A flurry of comments followed. One person claimed she stood motionless in front of the metallurgy main building for 3 hours, prompting others to ask if she was waiting for Borsippa's top student. Someone replied that last time she was simply waiting for him at the dorms. If so, just call him to come down. Sehun had seen these posts too and despaired, wondering what this was all about. He reassured himself, whatever is truly important, they'll come find me again. Just then the classroom door opened. A middle-aged man entered and introduced himself. Pleased to meet you all. From today I'll be teaching tool comprehension. My name is Rikuros Miles. He slapped the door to draw attention and ordered everyone to move to the training center immediately. Anyone who arrives last will be punished with 20 laps around the stadium. Begin. As soon as Rikuros finished speaking, the students sprang up and ran. Why are we suddenly being made to run? Sehun felt tense among the crowd. Wasn't this supposed to be a theory class? They kept nagging. I don't know either, just run. Finally, they all arrived. Rikuros punished Sehun by making him run the full 20 laps. He ran nonchalantly and replied, yes, I'm running. The people around kept talking. This guy's stamina is hopelessly low. Does he even pass the intermediate forging test? After a while, Rikuros stepped forward and called, everyone, pay attention. He explained seriously. Originally, tool comprehension was designed to teach the theory of equipment construction, but due to recent flame sword hunts, we must change training methods. There have been attacks targeting blacksmiths capable of forging flame swords of hero rank and above. Those attackers are called flame sword hunters. Running while listening, Sehun thought inwardly that even before he reversed time, it was an unsolved case. The instructor continued that no matter how solid your defenses are, ultimately the only thing that protects you is your own body. Rikuros raised his voice to admonish. Therefore, alongside studying tools in this class, you will also be taught skills to defend yourselves. The students responded in unison. Yes, sir, Rikuros said. Pleased. Excellent. Today our topic will be about swords. Sehun was telling himself that he needed to be a bit more cautious this time. His footsteps never faltered. To achieve his goal, the top priority was to enhance his own physical strength. Sehun clenched his hands slightly, silently assessing that even though it was something he had made with his own hands, its utility was indeed proving to be extremely effective. The system displayed information. This is a bracelet forged from ink stone, capable of absorbing the wearer's mana to increase its weight accordingly. It stores and siphons the master's mana, allowing the activation of the Burst Circle skill. The Burst Circle skill helps control gravity within a 1-meter radius around the user. Looking at the system's stat panel, he set a goal for himself. His basic stats had increased by an average of 5 points. Before the first year ends, he must make this body strong at any cost. After a long while, Rikuros finally turned and called to Sehun, "Stop running and get over here now." He glanced down at his hand, the burst ring. He secretly evaluated Sehun. "Your physical condition seems better than I imagined." Then Rikuros held out a sword toward him with a proposal. "To see if you have the aptitude for swordsmanship, try swinging this sword." Sehun took it and observed for a moment. It might be difficult to move flexibly due to the influence of the ink spider bracelet. In his heart, he hesitated. It's not exactly a formally polished technique, but should I try applying that specific move? Finally, Sehun made up his mind and brought the sword down with a whistle. The students outside immediately laughed mockingly. "Too slow. He's probably exhausted after finishing the running drill." Nonetheless, his striking posture doesn't look half bad. But Rikuros had a completely different evaluation. "No, it's actually excellent. Your sword path seems to have clearly defined the direction it needs to head toward." He turned and remarked, "However, the rhythm is still too rushed. It's best to fix this point before continuing." Sehun's gaze turned sharp in an instant. Rikuros's entire body seemed to shiver. The space seemed to turn pure white in his vision. Rikuros's eyes froze. He looked in confusion at the blade held close to his neck. Rikuros wondered to himself, did I just feel fear toward a technical student to the point of having such a terrifying hallucination? Then he hesitantly asked, "Who taught you that swordsmanship?" Sehun smiled slightly, but in his heart, he was completely confused. Why did that move work? He once said it was just an impromptu technique created in 10 minutes. Sehun recalled old memories. Back then, Guangsu scratched his ear and said, "Look, I told you I'd pay you back next time. People have to face shortages sometimes. So why are you so worked up?" He kept pleading, "Can't I use a technique instead of money? I'll teach you one. So please just stop." Returning to reality, Sehun confusedly scratched his head and lied. "I just frequently watch videos of other heroes' battles." Rikuros was skeptical but still smiled and asked about swordsmanship. "Do you truly want to be trained formally?" He suggested. "I will prepare a letter of recommendation for you to join the body control class at Akar Cuff." That afternoon at the Akar Cuff Center, Sehun stood dazed among the crowd. Ma Guangsu stomped his foot in rage. "I've told you how many times that I have nothing left to teach you, yet Jake still won't listen. Please don't treat me like this." This man was a retired S-rank hero and also a regular customer, Ma Guangsu, the man known as the Swordbreaker. Sehun found it a bit hard to believe. This guy who's always drunk and immersed in gambling is actually a professor? Seeing his appearance, Guangsu asked, "And who are you?" Sehun presented the letter and introduced himself. "I am Lee Sehun, a first-year student in the metallurgy department. I came here with a recommendation from Professor Rikuros." He was a bit surprised and asked back, "Rikuros was the one who recommended you?" Jake also scrambled up to explain. "That kid is this year's valedictorian of the Borsipa department," he bluntly evaluated. "No matter how I look at it, he seems completely ordinary." Then Guangsu questioned, "Hey kid, do you really desire to learn from me that much?" He excitedly confirmed, "Yes, that's right, sir." Hearing that, he pointed at Sehun and proposed, "In that case, if you can defeat that kid, I'll agree to take you on." He arranged a match for the two. Just a single round. Whoever lands a valid hit on the opponent first will win. Guangsu waved his hand to signal. "Then let the match begin." As soon as he spoke, Jake quickly lunged forward. Sehun, however, stood still, gripping the sword tightly. In Guangsu's heart, there was some suspicion. Is relaxing his way of optimizing flexibility by neutralizing all muscle strength? If so, the most basic counter is grappling rather than a direct strike. In the meantime, Jake swung his arm to strike. Guangsu sighed dejectedly. "This is exactly why I hate those who like to show off. only worrying about mental calculations without actually fighting properly. He complained, "Not interesting at all, what a buzzkill." Immediately after, Jake lunged forward to grab Sehun's waist. He gnashed his teeth in surprise. What the hell is this power? Then Sehun told himself, but he activated the burst circle skill. Power erupted from it in a dazzling flash of light. Sehun successfully turned the tables. He hissed in a bit of pain. Sehun's fist was right in front of his opponent's face. Blood also dripped from his nose. Seeing this, he smiled slightly and asked, "It seems I was a bit faster, wasn't I?" The space quickly fell silent. A moment later, Jake finally spoke. "That last attack was truly..." Before he could finish, Guangsu ordered everyone to disperse. "I remember I promised to teach you if you won." Hearing that, Sehun sat up and proposed, "Since he lost to me, shouldn't you be teaching me instead?" He resorted to provocation. "I never expected the valedictorian of a car cuff to fall at the hands of a Borsippa student. Just hearing it sounds pathetic." Jake stood dazed. Pathetic. Seeing this, Guangsu also made a proposal. "That's true. Perhaps I should straighten this idiot out a bit, so he can take care of himself." He turned around excitedly. So he sent a message, "I'll arrange a time and send it to you. Make sure to be there on time." This made Jake incredibly happy. He bowed deeply to express, "I sincerely thank you, master." Guangsu sighed irritably and waved him off. "If you're done, you can leave now." Then he turned to look at Sehun and says, "I still have personal matters to discuss with this kid." Once the room was left with only the two of them, Guangsu proposed, "Show me that sword technique you used against Rikuros again." He quickly complied. "I understand." Sehun looked at him tensely. Then he lunged forward with the sharp blade in his hand. However, in an instant, Sehun's sword was knocked away by Guangsu. He stood in place dazed, listening to his evaluation. "This is a move aimed at taking down the opponent at first sight," Guangsu coldly asserted. "The idea is good, but the execution is still very crude. Do you think it's normal for a sword technique to reveal its weakness by the second time it's used?" He scolded angrily. "If anyone dared teach this to others and called it good, I'd definitely break their limbs." But Guangsu didn't know that he was the one who taught it. Guangsu sighed and proposed, "Just wait and see. I will build a complete body based on this loose technical skeleton of yours." Sehun nonchalantly asked back, "So that means I'm officially enrolled in the class, right?" Guangsu, full of questions, confirmed, "Of course that's right." Hearing that, he felt at ease and bid farewell. "Then I'll take my leave for today." After Sehun left, Guangsu glanced at him and remarked, "That boy is truly stiff." Once outside, Sehun sighed in annoyance. "Acting all noble when you're just providing after-sales service." Just then, Jake also stepped up to greet him. "Hey you!" He replied in surprise. "You haven't left yet?" Then he pulled out a letter and said, "I have an item I want to give to you." Sehun uttered blankly, "What is this?" So he explained, "An invitation to join Noblesse. Basically, it's a gathering place for students from prestigious families." In his heart, Sehun realized, did Erica intend to give this to me from the start? Jake spoke excitedly. "There are a lot of snobs there, but I think this will be a good opportunity for you." However, Sehun hesitated. "I'm not sure if I should just accept something like this." He smiled brightly and expressed, "Thanks to you, I got into that class, so I should at least show my gratitude like this." Seeing this, Sehun also smiled and said, "Thanks." A while later, on the way, he silently evaluated the minor subjects he had registered for so far: barrier construction and body control. "I also want to try a minor subject from the Borsippa department. Currently, I'm weighing between curse alchemical arts and reinforcement." Because he's distracted, he accidentally bumped into someone. Sehun stopped to apologize. "Excuse me." His eyes suddenly froze. It turned out a girl had grabbed his wrist to scrutinize. "Did you create this yourself?" Sehun bluntly confirmed. "What if I did?" Then she proposed, "How about I perform a reinforcement on it for you?" The system quickly displayed a notification. A link with the target named Leah Claudel has been successfully established. Leah Claudel was someone capable of upgrading equipment by 2 full ranks through reinforcement. A genius among geniuses, someone who has crafted legendary tier gear, the one known as the person who revolutionized the entire reinforcement industry. Leah screamed in shock. Inkstone at a rare rank? She researched incessantly. If I just add a few formulas here. No, it's too wonderful to stop at this level. Then Leah tiredly held her head. No. How should I solve this dilemma? Witnessing that, Sehun silently assessed. I never expected her to be such a weird person. Then he asked plainly, is the equipment not good? Leah quickly presented the issue. The problem is that there are too many things I want to do with it. It's forged from inkstone. But why is the compatibility so incredibly high? There are too many formulas I could apply, and I can't decide. Hearing that, Sehun placed something on the table and said, if that's the case, it should be fine. Seeing her bewilderment, he reminded her, there's still more here. Sehun carefully instructed. Furthermore, it has a resonance phenomenon. So please keep that in mind. Leah asked excitedly. You? Who on earth are you? He nonchalantly introduced himself. I am Lee Sehun, a first-year metallurgy student, and also this year's Borsippa valedictorian. She was extremely surprised and marveled. A freshman? That's incredible. I'm a third-year student in the reinforcement department. Just then, someone walked up and interrupted their conversation. I have something to say. Follow me for a moment. Sehun quickly recognized Erika's errand boy. Leah stood up irritably and scolded. Can't you see we were talking first? Only then did he lower his voice and say, I want to settle this peacefully, so please give me a few minutes. Sehun replied coldly, just say it straight here. So he sighed and proposed, apologize for your rude attitude toward Miss Erika. You dared to tear up the invitation she gave you right in front of everyone. Sehun uttered in confusion. But the young lady herself asked me to tear it. His eyes immediately turned angry as he barked. Surely you have your own excuses. If only you hadn't accepted the invitation from the Myers house. Sehun questioned irritably, did Erika send you here? He hurriedly denied, no, this is entirely my own personal intention. Right then, Leah also let out a mocking laugh. Yeah, totally believable. She bluntly exposed him. Is there anyone who doesn't know you're the young master's trusted subordinate? This made him furious. How does a piece of trash like you dare? Maybe right now you're deluded into thinking you're someone special. He criticized Sehun. But Babel has no shortage of geniuses who far exceed your class. However, he didn't care and replied, by saying that, are you implying yourself? Sehun's words hit him like a bolt of lightning. The man shouted angrily, shut your mouth right now. Sehun witnessed his power erupting but still nonchalantly reached out his hand. With one hand, he was able to resist the swarm of phantom beasts charging at him. A surge of mana suddenly vanished. He spoke in admiration. Just as I predicted, that thing wasn't created purely from mana. You used the squadron swords as a medium to attack even if they were just illusions. This made him so scared he stammered, how could you? Sehun nonchalantly spun the weapon in his hand and answered, who knows? He laughed with excitement and marveled, sounds quite delicious. Simultaneously, the system announced the greedy iron link imprint was officially activated. He cried out helplessly, my 1 million is gone. Sehun smirked and said, with such an exquisite flavor, no wonder you'd go crazy over it. The system displayed link information, Ryu Unha, greedy iron, ultimate high-quality rank, a type of iron capable of generating thermal energy by devouring other types of iron. It corrodes metal on contact and absorbs their cores into itself. Hunts and consumes iron to produce mineral blood. Remaining durability, 78%. Burst circle. In an instant, Sehun lunged forward. He punched him straight in the stomach, making the man collapse on the spot. Sehun turned and called Leah. So, senior. He glanced at her and asked, is there any lecture in the reinforcement department that you feel is worth recommending to me? Lee's face suddenly turned red, and then she spoke. Ancient reinforcement. There's an extremely outstanding senior there named Leah Claudel. After leaving, the man clutched his stomach in pain. Damn it all, he grumbled incessantly. Unbelievable that a freshman possesses such staggering reaction speed. Just then, Erica also appeared from ahead. "Excuse me, I want to borrow that squadron sword to examine it for a bit." He jumped in fright and screamed, "Miss Erica, how long have you been here?" Then the subordinate respectfully handed it over to her. Here it is, Mississippi." Erica looked at the sword in her hand and reminded him, "You don't need to report this to my brother. As for the patriarch, I will speak to him privately myself later." He confusedly scratched his head and replied, "Yes, I understand." Erica silently assessed. As expected of gear used as a medium, it has an anti-theft seal carved onto it. She was a bit confused in her heart. Could he have independently created a counter-skill based on my magic and Professor Roberts? In Erica's heart, a sense of uncertainty began to grow. Lee Se-hun. His talent for forging techniques might even far exceed S-rank. I absolutely must adjust the evaluation of his magic compatibility to A-rank. The system suddenly popped up. A link with the target named Erica Inoue has been established. This left Se-hun bewildered. What's going on? He began to speculate. Did she secretly watch while I was fighting that subordinate? Se-hun held the blades in his hand helplessly. Anyway, at least I received decent compensation. 10 blades are still missing. Leaving them like this is a bit raw, but if combined with black spirit thread, they'll definitely be useful. He let out a long yawn and sighed. Whatever, putting that aside, I was really looking forward to Professor Kim In-cheol's class. I never thought that today I'd only have to listen to boring theories that I've already memorized by heart. Immediately after, In-cheol spoke up with a serious tone. That is enough for the explanation. Now, let us begin with the core part of the lesson. He held an item from the table and explained, even if you use the exact same type of metal, its shape will transform completely depending on how you adjust the arrangement of mana. A stone suddenly appeared along with In-cheol's words. The ability to apply this metal deformation technique is the deciding factor in the versatility of a weapon. He placed various stones on the table. In-cheol transformed it back into its original piece of iron and asserted, "Therefore, if you have chosen to follow the path of a blacksmith, you must perfectly grasp the potential of the metal you are handling." In-cheol presented the challenge. In today's class, we will practice the deformation technique on these iron ingots. He asked someone to distribute the stones and gave the requirements. First, utilize the flow of mana to create a scratch approximately 3 centimeters deep exactly at the center of the iron ingot. This material has been refined to respond extremely sensitively to deformation, so you must handle it very carefully. Internally, Se-hun silently noted that it seemed the professor did not completely reject forging methods that utilized magic. In-cheol announced clearly, "The time limit is 10 minutes. Everyone may begin now." The students looked utterly bewildered with the iron ingots in their hands. "Why is this happening to me?" everyone grumbled incessantly. "It won't return to its original shape anymore." Right then, 2 people stepped forward. Se-hun spoke nonchalantly, "I've finished," while Hans glanced at him and reported, "I am done as well, sir." In-cheol praised them with satisfaction. "Very good. You 2 may move on to the next stage of training." Then he began to present a different task. "I will demonstrate another arrangement diagram. Everyone try to follow it." Hans glanced at Se-hun with total confidence. He felt his speed and level of completion were equal to the other boys. "I will definitely win this time." In-cheol continued to explain. "Next will be an arrangement according to this diagram." He rushed to perform it with skyrocketing confidence, thinking his time had finally come. Hans thought happily to himself that he would complete this most perfectly to make everyone marvel. However, after he finished, In-cheol requested, "Hans Barmit, try returning that iron ingot to its original state." Hans was instantly dazed and asked back, "Excuse me, sir, what did you say?" When he tried to do it, he became flustered. Why did it turn out like this? Hans realized helplessly that the arrangement of the mana flows had been completely destroyed. Seeing this, In-cheol spoke up. "That iron ingot could not withstand the deformation you just performed. In other words, it proves your processing method was flawed from the very first step." Hans asked in confusion, "But I clearly did exactly as you instructed, Professor." He bowed his head low and explained that what he had emphasized earlier was that the students must fully understand the inherent potential of the metal. In-cheol continued to criticize, If you cannot restore the mana structure that has been affected, then that is no longer deformation, but a severe degradation of the equipment. It will become a major variable affecting quality and performance, so you must study this part again carefully later. Hearing this, Hans bowed low and replied, I will keep your teaching firmly in mind, sir. Then he glanced at Sehun, wondering if that guy really realized the key point. Finally, he judged for himself that the other boy probably just got lucky while being absent-minded. However, immediately after, Sehun succeeded. It actually worked. He returned the iron ingot to its original form. This left the students utterly bewildered. They wondered how that was possible when the professor had just said the method wasn't feasible. Even Incheol was flustered. Student Lee Sehun, would you please perform that deformation technique for me once more? Sehun thought helplessly to himself that he had accidentally caused the professor to misunderstand. He explained sheepishly, this is only feasible because this iron has been specially adjusted for students. If it were a standard iron ingot, it would definitely be impossible. Watching everything unfold, Incheol realized something new. So that's it. It's possible because of the sensitive nature of this refined iron ingot. He pondered thoughtfully that he never expected that even he would miss such a critical detail. A top-tier conqueror and also the greatest blacksmith, Saint Fire Lee Kent's. He had created it during his years as an S-rank hero, and throughout the decades that followed, no one had been able to deny it. The deformation formula was considered the core of every blacksmith in the world, the truth of steel. Thinking of this, Incheol hesitated slightly. He wondered if he should believe that it's possible for this boy. Sehun turned away, thinking that if the professor noticed it again, that would be twice in a row. Outside, it was getting dark, and Incheol spoke. Class ends here. You are all dismissed. Student Lee Sehun, could you stay behind a moment so I can speak with you? He stopped and asked, is something wrong, sir? Incheol pulled out an item and began. This is a gift to celebrate your admission. Since you helped me a great deal with the move to Babel, the system also displayed information. Blood flame or rare rank, high quality. A type of or containing the essence of the dark red flame. It possesses a special ability specifically used to melt mixed ores into liquid form. Sehun hesitated slightly, wondering what the item was. Incheol explained that if he could absorb the essence from this fire gem, he would permanently enhance his dark red flame, as he'd heard the boy could control blood fire. Hearing this, he nodded happily and said, I thank you sincerely, sir. This gift will definitely be a massive help to me. Incheol suddenly spoke up to ask one more thing. He wanted to know if the boy had any intention of registering for the minor course he taught personally. He replied calmly, Are you referring to the basic equipment research course, sir? This made Incheol a bit surprised that he knew about the course. Sehun nonchalantly confirmed that he knew of it. In his heart, he evaluated that it was one of the classes Babel invested in with the largest budget. Sehun was a bit confused about what he should do now. Before he turned back time, he had never even heard the name Kim Incheol. So it's very likely the end for this professor wasn't very good. However, currently, he is a professor receiving a great deal of attention. And so Sehun happily spoke. I have decided to participate in that course, sir. Incheol asked with concern if he would be okay, given that he'd already registered for several minor subjects. But he explained calmly that if he added this course, it would only be his fourth one. Incheol had no choice but to shake Sehun's hand and remark that he looked forward to working with him. Sehun replied politely that he felt the same. At the same time, the system displayed a notification. Extracting link from subject Kim Incheol. The link level with creator Lee Sehun is currently at level 1. Link, Kim Incheol. Fire-bearing iron, high rank, medium-low quality. A type of metal that contains a conflagration within. It possesses properties similar to wood, with the ability to preserve a flame inside itself. Sehun pondered to himself that if a person has the ability to extract metal from another's body, then it means they can also forge and temper the human body itself. When multiple types of attribute mana coexist in one body, they will cause conflict with each other. Because this is extremely dangerous for a blacksmith who always requires absolute precision, using only the single attribute best suited to one's talent has become an unwritten rule. However, I am a completely different case. The internal mana used to block the temperature is being depleted appropriately. Once the body is empty of mana, it will begin to draw the essence of the dark red flame inside. What I need to do as a blacksmith is establish a specialized mana circuit for the dark red flame right within my own body. A moment later, Sehun let out another sigh of relief. He understood clearly that only in this way could he perform forging right within himself. The system announced, "Your attribute mana has been powered up from Bloodfire rank F to Bloodfire rank E+." A series of notifications rang out. You have learned the S-rank skill, Soul Body Forging Magic. The body is the most primitive material a blacksmith can polish. When the internal mana circuits are forged, physical abilities will increase and strength will be enhanced. All basic stats increased significantly due to the skills effect. Lee Sehun. Strength, D15. Durability, D100. Mana, D19. Speed, E87. Sehun gnashed his teeth and thought about the soul body forging magic. He remembered in his past life how he struggled when Leah questioned whether he intended to give up when he already had the materials in hand. She laughed and asked if he was really just going to resignedly accept that. Returning to reality, he smiled with satisfaction and steeled himself to make full use of everything that could be utilized. And regardless of whether the opponent is an ally or an enemy, I will not let myself regret anything this time. At a massive stone-paved building, a voice called out, "Today we will proceed to finalize the items you have crafted in previous lessons. These finished products are expected to be supplied both inside and outside the academy." A red-haired man stood with his hands on his hips before everyone. Therefore, it can be stated that today's results will decide the entire outcome of this first semester. Thus, everyone, give it your all so you won't regret it later. Is that clear? Everyone shouted in unison that they understood. Sehun observed the iron bar in his hand and thought, everything really is a mess. Because my current body can't keep up with my reflexes, many details are misaligned. With his hammer in hand, he thought that this was no longer a time where he could afford to be leisurely. Flames flared up as waves of fire struck this place directly. A pot of boiling water was steaming. Sehun held the long object in his hand and quietly observed that the result should be acceptable like this. But he seemed to become anxious, thinking that with the remaining time, it would be difficult to complete the other tasks. If he only did everything at an average level, he might receive additional budget support. He placed it on the whetstone. After all, putting his heart into creating at least one truly high-quality item was the right thing to do. His hands skated across the whetstone as he sharpened the iron bar. He stood there with intense focus. That sound surged in Sehun's head, a sound like the apocalypse drawing near. He looked down at it. Every time he heard this unique sound, he produced exquisite items. All his focus was poured into it with the thought that this was not merely a temporary sharpness, but a blade etched into its own shadow. Lights flashed below under the name, White Light. The information appeared even more clearly. The White Light longsword weapon has finally been completed. A great blacksmith always reveals his will through the most basic things. The technique of an artisan who knows how to maximize the potential of materials to create a new blade is truly worthy of being called the best. A notification appeared. You have comprehended the skill, White Light Flow C. Two shiny swords appeared along with their information. White Light Longsword. Rare rank, high quality. This is a long sword possessing a pure, snowy white blade. The blade is exquisitely sharpened, combined with a mana arrangement that makes it both durable and incredibly sharp. A masterpiece created by a blacksmith with outstanding skills. Striking power increases when mana is channeled. Sehun held the newly crafted weapon and sighed with relief, thinking the result was acceptable given he only used common iron. He felt hopeful looking at this weapon. His skills from before he turned back time were gradually being restored, if only a little. Two knights stood behind holding their swords anxiously and whimpered in turn about how they hated the feeling and considered dropping out. The next morning, Saturday, as the red-haired man sat in a cafe intently checking his phone, a voice spoke up. I never expected you would want to witness my reinforcement technique. Sehun was looking around as they walked. Well, actually, I was quite curious about your basic skills. It seems quite crowded here, doesn't it? Leah, walking beside him, was also observing. She told him not to worry, as her workspace was much quieter. The two of them were on their way to a peaceful farmhouse and asked in turn about the distance and if the boy thought he could easily see her technique. She pulled him into the Akelcuff hardware store and walked in, calling out loudly for her grandmother. Her voice echoed, "I'm here." Helena sat inside, picking her ear with her pinky and frowning. "I'm not deaf. There's no need to shout like that." Sehun, following behind, seemed annoyed when she questioned if the kid was her boyfriend. Leah stood before him and replied that there was no such thing. He only gradually showed a smile when she spoke about him being the valedictorian. Helena replied that Babel must be in decline if they're accepting someone who looks so weak. Then Helena stood up from the desk and introduced herself. Sehun spoke up to say he was a first-year student. She seemed to fly into a rage. "Stop the idle chatter and get to work quickly. The workload has piled up this week because of these freshmen." Leah glanced elsewhere and sighed. Yes, I know, Grandma." She pointed to the room behind her. "The path to the forge is this way." Looking at the items in the room, Sehun thought the old woman's skills were more profound than he imagined. He followed behind, observing carefully and thinking that he truly could not understand why someone like her would be running a hardware store. Walking ahead and holding various items, Leah wondered about the piled-up work. A colorful palette was placed on the table. "This is the reinforcement palette, and these are the powders ground from magic stones." He stood there with his arms crossed, thinking he knew the standard was 8 colors, but she used them in such a diverse way. Then he spoke up. "Is your job to restore damaged reinforcement formulas using these?" Leah picked up a paintbrush. "Exactly." One hand held a pan while the other dipped the brush into the palette. "Thanks to this, I can earn money while performing reinforcements to my heart's content without worrying about material costs." The painted lines shimmered with colors. An ordinary pan became more impressive through her hands. Sehun stood there quietly observing and thinking. He came here because she seemed to be facing a slump in her work. He recalled a memory of someone standing before him and saying he was a has-been who brought failure to every exam. The image of Leah focused on the brush and the pan made thoughts rise in him. Seeing it with his own eyes, he thought he'd found the cause and the solution for her slump. Along with his thoughts, he turned to walk away. The ability to immerse oneself in work like that was also a talent. With his hands in his pockets, he stood before a wooden table. An item on the table caught Sehun's eye. It would resonate with the mana arrangement to create a special effect. He leaned down for a closer look. It had been a long time since he last etched a white light, and he was starting to feel an itch in his hands. Helena saw this from behind and told him to try using it. She frowned as she stood behind him. "Of course, if you have the ability to do it, just pick any item from that pile over there." He suddenly glanced back, thinking he got the feeling she was ordering him around on purpose. He turned his head to look. If he was allowed to use a special whetstone of that quality, he definitely had to try it at least once. Then, his gaze locked directly onto it. His hand gripped its handle. She stood behind him with her arms crossed, watching. "Are you really going to do it with that item?" Sehun excitedly touched the blade of the knife. "That's right. Looking at how the blade is worn evenly and the axis isn't twisted at all. It's clear this knife belongs to someone who truly understands how to use a sword." He stood before the table holding the whetstone with a thought. For this kind of whetstone, it's the type where magic particles are compressed most evenly. If he used this, it would be powerful enough to handle even grinding the blade to its ultimate limit of sharpness. His hands were gentle and highly technical as he placed the knife onto the whetstone. Helena stood behind him with a massive question in her mind. Is this kid really just a freshman who enrolled this year? Leah stood behind them and shouted excitedly, startling her. "It's all finished!" She suddenly snapped out of it and realized, "Oh, Grandma, when did you get here?" She didn't turn her head back to look. "I don't even know myself, you silly girl." She stepped up and stood next to her, looking over. "You were trying to find a mistake from your junior, but in the end, you were the one who got taught a lesson, weren't you?" Helena gave her a hard shove back, clearly annoyed. "Will you just shut up already?" She looked towards Sehun, who was hesitating. "Are you done with all the work?" He smiled and replied, "Right now, this is the best result I can manage. Next time, I'll definitely do even better." Helena swung the sword down hard. "All right then, you two better get going home early." Leah grabbed his arm and walked outside, glancing back. "She's just being grumpy for no reason. Let's go. Inside, she stood with her hands on her hips where he had just been working. Suddenly, a man in a formal suit knocked loudly on the door. Sis, are you forging something? Helena peeked out, frowning. Keep it down a bit. He quickly rubbed his head sheepishly. There's a huge backlog of orders right now. How's that kitchen knife coming along? His words came out somewhat impatiently. When are you going to give up that job at the restaurant? Someone who's supposed to be a professor at the combat department, and yet... She snapped back irritably. Stop nagging about other people's hobbies. He stepped in and picked up the knife on the table. Ah, here it is. Suddenly, he felt something unusual. He furrowed his brows and turned to look. Sis, did you sharpen this while drinking again? She stood there with her arms crossed and her head down. I didn't do that, he continued. Then could this be the work of those new assistants you've been close with lately? Their skills must have improved by leaps and bounds too. Helena bowed her head and closed her eyes. It was a freshman. He turned back, unable to believe his eyes. What? Her eyes opened as she answered. A kid from the new class who just enrolled this year is the one who sharpened it. Remembering the image of Sehun during that statement. Just who on earth is that guy anyway? As Sehun walked out, he spoke up. So that old lady at the hardware store was originally a former instructor at the alchemy department? Leah, walking beside him, replied, That's right. I heard she retired 5 years ago and came to Akelkuf to open this shop. He glanced down at her. I wonder if there's some hidden story behind that? She looked back. I'm not sure. It's probably nothing too special. Images of the academy appeared as she told the story. In the last 5 years, quite a few professors have left the alchemy department. He looked over and replied, Is that so? In his heart, Sehun couldn't stop thinking. Considering this place will become the weakest department in Babel in the future. This is clearly a story I can't just ignore. Leah, walking beside him, put her hand to her chest. But more importantly, what do you think of my enhancement technique? He looked down at her, surprised. The basics are definitely beyond reproach. It's pretty solid. Her face became full of pride. Oh my, that's no big deal. Suddenly, he dampened the mood. However, your way of thinking is still too narrow. The sky seemed to grow darker as Leah jumped out to stand in front of him. What did you just say? Sehun pointed directly at her. You already thought of more optimal solutions, but you didn't dare to apply them. She stammered back. How could you possibly realize that? Leah seemed to fall into a pensive silence, lowering her head to listen to the critique. If you didn't know, you could learn, but if you already know and still can't do it, that's the real problem. A craftsman's imagination is their weapon and their talent, yet you're suppressing it yourself. Everything seemed to shatter inside her. It's as if do you think I do things this way just because I don't understand it? Sehun winked, sighed, and started looking for something in his coat. Then he pulled out a sword, surprising her. I have other plans, so I can't perform for long. Pay close attention. He brought out a stone from under the water as an example. Suppose someone asked you to place a stone beneath the surface of the water. Creating the stone and dropping it in is the blacksmith's job. The image gradually faded. But capturing the image of that sinking stone upon the water itself is the art of enhancement. That is why enhancement always carries the essence of dreams. A sword appeared with red lights swirling around like blood fire. That sword flew in front of her, full of surprises. As power swirled around with white light swordsmanship, its powerful image emerged. Don't just affect the outer shell. Bestow that enhancement deep into the core of the weapon. He observed the knife in his hand as power swirled around it. If one layer isn't enough, break them down into several different levels. Sehun's hand swept it down firmly. When you do it this way, he stood there and threw it hard behind him until it stood straight in the ground. It pierces straight into the earth. Everything seemed to stop for that path of power. He looked down, thinking seriously. Even if I can't claim this is a standard enhancement technique, if it's Leah, seeing her with her hand to her chin made his thoughts grow. Geniuses like her usually find their own path even when they're in a state of hesitation. Suddenly, Leah frantically pointed behind him. Junior, let me borrow that item for a moment. Please, let me borrow it. She stood down there, pulling on Sehun like a swing. I promise I'll finish it perfectly and give it back. Please, please. He was breaking a cold sweat and had to hand the item over. I don't mind, but if you're taking that, you might as well take this too. She jumped up in pure joy as if she had just found love. Thank you so much. I love you to death. She vanished, leaving him all alone right there. Sehun breathed a sigh of relief as he received a notification, establishing a link with target Leah Claudel. Synchronization level with creator Lee Sehun has reached level 1. He muttered to himself, that girl really is still a child. Standing in the crowded campus, Sehun looked around and thought, finally, I have a chance to meet one of those 3 hounds today. Every battle between the wild hound and the demon god of fading light during their youth, remembering that Erica was walking behind him made him think. But more importantly, he finally spoke up. What are you doing? She whispered creepily. I'm just following you. He replied indifferently. So if I tell you to go somewhere else now, would you go? She stepped up to walk beside him. I'll go, because I can totally just watch you from a distance anyway. Sehun glanced back, sighed, and looked away. I figured you'd do that. All right. He stepped forward. Let's head inside. An item like frozen snow appeared with an introduction. Erica Inoue's socially contracted link. Grade, rare. Quality, low to medium. A refined artificial magic or that stabilizes mana chaos when mixed with other minerals. Another magic stone appeared with a notification. Leah Claudel's complex explosive block link. Grade, rare. Quality, premium. A sharp or with many blended colors. It acts as an excellent amplifier to maximize the potential of composite materials. At the massive stadium campus, Lanfang appeared adorably on the projection screen. A warm welcome to the freshmen of Babel Academy. You've arrived at the famous landmark of the martial arts arena. I send my most respectful greetings to all of you for today's ranking match. She posed and winked on the screen. I am the youngest professor of the martial arts department, and I'll be taking on the role of commentator today. My name is Lan Fong. Under the spotlight, her voice continued to ring out. Now, without making you wait any longer, let's introduce today's fighters. The tall silhouette of a woman appeared under the lights. First, look over here, the 4th-year valedictorian of the Akar Kuf region, and also the future successor of the Myers family, the place that specializes in training S-rank heroes. This person tossed her brilliant golden hair back. A perfect superhuman who has continuously broken records and held the #1 spot at the martial arts arena for the past 3 years. She is currently an active A-rank hero and our champion. The pretty face of this girl was revealed. She was also the Sword Saint, the one who finally succeeded in conquering the highest peak of the hero tower, Arya Myers. Loud noises erupted. Above them, Sehun and Erica stood with their arms crossed, looking down. Sis, please take me with you. Arya is shining way too bright. Fong's commentary continued, and the first player who dares to stand up and challenge the champion today. The light shone down on a man with a long sword on his back. A South Korean intangible cultural heritage, the heir to the fire will remnant spear technique, the 3rd-year valedictorian of the Spearman Department, and a top candidate for the 10th spot in the martial arts arena. Sehun looked down and thought, finally, we've run into each other. This person stood there unleashing his power, the wild hound. Fong also shouted his name, Yom Song-ha. Each sword strike flashed out with fire, stopping just as they nearly touched the ground. Arya, on the other side, also skillfully controlled her sword. She launched an attack that sent him leaping backward. He grit his teeth and strained his strength. His hand gripped tightly onto the wooden post beside him. Arya's eyes flashed with a terrifying light. Then, flames swirled in a violent circle around her, seemingly wanting to directly attack Song-ha. This made Sehun, standing above, stop to think. Even considering his young age, he still hasn't reached the necessary standard. Could it be that he isn't receiving support worthy of the title of the Fire Will Remnant Spear's successor? Song-ha held his hand behind him in a thinking stance. There are quite a few things that feel off to me, but the biggest obstacle is the equipment set he's currently using. But he threw it straight away and prepared to charge in. A long, sharp sword thrust just barely missed his neck. Song-ha looked bewildered by the sword tip at his throat. Then he slumped. I've lost. Arya held her sword in front of her happily. You've worked hard. The match is officially over. The final winner is Arya Myers. The two of them stood on the same stage. Fong, holding the mic on the other side, continued her job. Next, we will proceed with the interview for both fighters. That was the plan. But student Yom Song-ha had to leave early due to an unexpected reason. She put her hand over her mouth and laughed. Having to face off directly against rank 9 right after that is indeed too much even for me. Song-ha quietly walked away while all the spotlights were focused on Arya. Or should I fill this empty time with a live Q&A session with me? Up there. The audience was extremely enthusiastic. We agree, Sehun, watching from above, winked and thought. That guy looks like he's in a really foul mood. He suddenly stood up, making Erica turn toward him. Are you planning to waste your ticket and not watch the rest of the match? He put his hands in his pockets and replied, Yeah, I'm not really interested in that fighting style. He spoke as he walked away. Just look at her, standing there looking quite impatient. Isn't she? Erica turned with a look of concern, thinking, It's a relief to know you didn't come here to meet your brother. But why is he acting so angry? Suddenly, a voice spoke up beside her. An interesting freshman? Arya was already standing there, looking back. Her orange eyes looked back full of hope. Perhaps I've already found someone like that. Song-ha was meditating at a park located near the martial arts stadium. Sehun walked up quietly with the thought. Yom Song-ha is currently still alive and quite healthy. Song-ha was thinking back to when he unleashed those flashy bursts of power. Even if his personality is a bit like a dog's, he was still a core member of the Suicide Squad. And he was also the last person who sacrificed his life to destroy the demon god of doom. Standing behind him, he thought. Because he hasn't become too corrupt yet, maybe this time I'll be able to collect the link stone more smoothly. Meanwhile, he was frowning with his head down. You were just standing there watching the practice match, weren't you? Sehun replied with his hands in his pockets. That's right. I watched a little bit. His head peeked back slightly. The fact that you were able to find me here proves your strength isn't exactly mediocre. Song-ha turned with a sinister look. It's you again? Why is the valedictorian of the Borsipa department appearing in a place like this? He stood there thinking with concern. Why is he being so aggressive? Then he spoke up. I came here hoping the two of us could discuss things a little. Then he turned his head back to its original position. Get lost. Get out of my sight. Sehun stepped forward slowly. This will actually benefit you, senior. But he had already crouched down and replied, Maybe you don't understand, so I'll only repeat this once. I absolutely loathe weaklings. Song-ha, he stood. Especially those who can't do anything for their family, and those who mistakenly think their little tricks can stand on equal footing with me. So, no matter what you want to talk about, just go back. A sentence that left him stunned. You low-class blacksmith. Remembering what Song-ha used to do in the past. Go back to your workshop and cast some gear. Know your place and stay where you belong. This didn't make him think too much about it. Compared to the period when he was known as a mad dog, he actually looked quite polite right now. Sehun was already casting a spell in his hand while thinking. Looking at that attitude, I know for sure that words won't solve this. Song-ha also glanced back. It seems you're determined not to back down. He stepped toward where he was casting the spell and spoke up. I also have one thing to tell you. What came next made him freeze. The history of the Fire Will Remnant Spear will eventually be ended by your own hands. Because of that, Song-ha charged forward at high speed. His hand clenched tightly as he unleashed his power. His punch was thrown, but Sehun blocked it. A notification appeared at the same time he was blown far away. The Greed Kill link mark has been officially activated. He furrowed his brows in bewilderment, thinking, did he just nullify a punch that was enhanced with my magic? Flames swirled around Song-ha as he focused his thoughts on him. He definitely lives up to his reputation as the department's valedictorian. Perhaps, after all, he is qualified enough to stand and talk to me. His attitude became more determined. However, the trajectory of the remnant fire magic is still lingering. This is the true power of the Fire Will Remnant Spear. Everything ends right here. The two of them flew directly toward each other. Sehun seemed to create a shield to hurl fire at Song-ha. Smoke billowed up, hiding him. Then he slowly emerged from the smoke. Meanwhile, further away, he was somewhat surprised. What? Why are the sparks that only react to my magic sitting right in his hand? Don't tell me. Terrifying things were approaching. Did he separate and steal it already? Suddenly, a cluster of fire flew straight past his neck. He looked forward and thought, this bastard, Songha, with his purple power, stood in a martial arts stance, making him unable to stop thinking. He looks like he's about to go crazy and lose control any second now. The image of a pink-haired man carrying a weapon on his shoulder in front of the gate of the Hao Hoa Gate disaster probably broke out precisely because of this hot-headed personality. A punch from him was about to be thrown. It rushed in accurately while the victim thought the effect of greed kill was about to disappear. And my endurance has reached its limit. As the fist was about to hit Sehun's face, the duration of greed kill ran out. My body can't push any further either. They fell as if they had lost gravity from a height. At the same time, he caught Songha's punch, leaving him completely shocked. But no, it was Jake, who was struggling to squeeze in and intercept the punch, making him jump. Jake Myers. He then spoke up. Do you know this valedictorian of the Borsippa department? He stammered back. Yes, sort of. We know each other. After that, he also pulled his hand back. He walked to another, more somber spot. Leave this place immediately, Jake nervously shouted. Yes, sir. Then he turned and said to him, Sehun, let's get out of here. He was glancing at him, turning pale with fear. Remember what I said. Don't go saying those weird things anymore. Get out of here quickly. On the other side, Songha stood alone with his thoughts. Just now, I couldn't suppress my emotions and threw a punch. One more bit and I would have tarnished the honor of the Fire Will Remnant Spear and caused trouble for Master. His eyes looked downward. On the street, Jake walked ahead of him. What the hell were you thinking? Picking a fight with that senior. If I hadn't stepped in to stop it in time, you probably would have actually died. Sehun lowered his head and sighed with relief. Me? There's no way it would be that easy. He looked worried beside him. What did you just say? A notification appeared before his eyes. A link with the target Yom Songha has been successfully established. He spoke up. Just now, I was only issuing a threat to him, but thoughts also appeared in his head. The next step is to extract the link stone. Thinking of Songha's fierce fighting image. However, the person I used to know was exactly Mad Dog Yom Songha. If he's still this soft right now, the effectiveness of the link stone might change. I need to calculate a way to increase the link level with Yom Songha. Then he looked at Jake and thought, still, this guy looks like he'll be very useful. He also asked, is your hand injured at all? He beamed and pointed at the wound in his palm. It's fine. My hands were always tough. Sehun, walking beside him, glanced over and thought, his hands are tough? That's ridiculous. He turned toward him. But more importantly, he gestured and spoke up. What did you say about my sister back at the front of the school? He was a bit surprised. You mean that Arya Myers? He replied. That's right. He then answered. It's nothing major. I just think she's a bit arrogant. Jake grabbed his head in sheer terror. What? No wonder she kept grilling me about everything related to you. Sehun stood there thinking of Arya. She's definitely started keeping an eye on you. Sehun's face grew cold as he remembered the woman being discussed. My sister seems to have started paying attention to you. The sister mentioned Arya was smiling. He sighed helplessly. In the middle of such a noisy crowd and she still heard that? Her hearing is way too sharp. Jake tried to advise him. Next time, please keep your voice down. My sister is an A-rank hero after all. Sehun put his hands in his pockets and spoke mockingly. Actually, if it's just pure interest, I'm quite happy to receive it. When he looked over at Jake, who was despondently scratching his head, he thought, Yom Songha's biggest concern is probably defeating Arya. If I can attract the attention of her rival, my influence will naturally increase. He put on a weary face and let out a long sigh. Don't underestimate it like that. You don't understand. My sister is truly. Before he could finish his sentence, Sehun suddenly interjected bluntly. A petty and manipulative person, right? Jake flinched reflexively and looked around frantically. Well, maybe you shouldn't use words that harsh. Suddenly, his face became somber. Sehun fell silent upon hearing the question. But why do you have such a strong dislike for my sister? A girl in armor with golden hair, holding a powerful black sword, Sword Saint Arya Myers. She stood with the posture of a monarch, directly facing the horde of monsters. This had also once been a soulless and faded sword. Beneath the deep black moon, Arya spread her wings wide and raised that sword toward the high heavens. One day, that sword saint suddenly vanished without a trace, and the one who appeared later was the person who had turned the remains of a demon god into their own weapon. The demon god of fading light, Sehun, in the darkness, only let out a faint smirk. Just looking at her face tells me there's going to be trouble. After that, he just sauntered away, waving a hand lazily in farewell. I'm off. Jake stood dazed behind him, still not understanding what was going on. What just happened? He suddenly noticed a notification chime from his phone. On his phone screen, he had received a message from Big Sister Arya Myers. It seems you've just made a very interesting friend. Tell me everything later, okay? After reading it, he started shaking in fear. Does she mean I have to be the bridge between the two of them from now on? Suddenly, his eyes froze and he turned pale. Arya sent another message that carried a subtly dark implication. Your petty and manipulative big sister just asked you for a little favor. Jake stood alone, looking haggard as he read the message on the street. Damn it! The scene shifted to the next morning at a lecture hall within Babel Academy. Sehun sat in class, placing a hand on his shoulder because it felt sore. Did I go a bit too far yesterday when I faced off against Yom Song-ha? Hans, sitting at the desk in front, spoke with moving lips. The schedule for the exchange session will be finalized soon. Reese, holding a cane and driving a tiny vehicle, burst into the classroom and shouted, Quiet, everyone. He stepped in front of the class, raised his cane and gave a continuous introduction. My name is Reese Dova. I will be in charge of your major classes for the next 2 weeks. My teaching content will revolve around attribute refining. When the students in that room saw him, their faces all turned pale. They shared a single thought. This is the professor famous for being a total lunatic. Reese very calmly spoke with a serious tone. Before we start the lesson, I have an announcement. You must take full advantage of this opportunity and submit your homework to me by next Thursday. First up, David. Hearing his name, David jumped and replied, Sir, I'm here. Tiny Reese held a piece of paper, sitting comfortably on his vehicle. And the last person on the list is Lee Sehun. Hearing his name called, he stood up. Hans, sitting in front, glanced down. I wonder if everyone is curious about how much budget he'll receive? The person sitting next to him also had a thought. I have a feeling the amount he gets must be at least 3 times higher than mine. Reese suddenly spoke up loudly with an announcement regarding student Sehun's budget. It hasn't been officially announced yet. Hearing this, he was startled and surprised. What do you mean, sir? He had intentionally let his hair hang down to cover his eyes just because people kept criticizing his hairstyle as outdated and ugly. Reese, very calm, even raised a hand to stroke his white beard. Because the level of completion in the product you submitted reached such a massive contrast, far exceeding expectations, the school has decided to include it in the public auction for second-year students taking place this Wednesday. He continued to explain the reason. Therefore, we will determine your budget based on the final closing bid. Please be patient and wait a little longer. Sehun stood there silently, frowning in thought. Is this a trick by Vice Principal Michael? He's intentionally intervening to handle this separately like this. His mind was still preoccupied with thoughts about this, but on second thought, if there was anything fishy about the order, Professor Kim and Cheol would have surely stepped in to stop it beforehand. He then spoke up to reply to him. I understand the situation, sir. Reese didn't look scary but instead beckoned with his hand to start the next lecture. The topic we will be researching together today is about excess mana. An outstanding student has volunteered to assist me in this intensive practical session. Please come in. That person was Song-ha. He revealed himself and entered the room during Reese's introduction. Introduction to the class. This is my temporary teaching assistant, Yom Song-ha, a third-year student majoring in spearmanship at a car cuff. A student sitting next to Sehun was surprised and said loudly, Why would that famous senior suddenly show up here? Everyone in class seemed just as excited as if they had seen a beautiful girl. Yom Song-ha stood right beside the professor, and he continued with the lecture. That's enough for introductions. Let's master the basic concepts before moving on to practice. Circular specimens emitting mana were mentioned in the context of weapon forging. The forms of excess mana are mainly divided into two types. The first type is the basic energy charge form. The second type is the independent form capable of generating its own mana or absorbing it from the surrounding atmosphere. Both have their own pros and cons, but the independent type possesses a much higher level of difficulty. Reese spoke the theoretical lecture in a stern voice. The reason is that the method for constructing a mana core doesn't have a single fixed standard. It will change depending on the materials, the technique, and the mana source of the creator themselves. He looked toward Yom Song-ha standing beside him and continued, therefore, all of you will start with the energy charge type first. Assistant, if you please. His hand began to clench and flex, emitting a red mana. The red mana flow began to appear in the classroom space. Fire attribute energy is inherently very explosive, making it difficult to turn into excess mana for use. He created 2 red mana flows that met in an arc. However, if that nature can be restrained, it will reveal excellent storage capabilities. Reese continued the explanation according to the simulation created by Song-ha. A typical example is the technique my assistant is demonstrating right now, the Fire Will Remnant Flame Spear. Hans, witnessing this performance, froze in surprise. Is it possible to control fire attribute mana to that extent? The student sitting next to him was equally astonished. Even controlling a forge is already too much for me. Reese, on the podium, held up a device in his hand. Since we are lucky enough to have such a talented assistant, we must make good use of this opportunity. Submit your assignments before next Thursday. The whiteboard clearly stated his requirements. Topic: Fire attribute excess mana in energy charge form with the image of a fire wheel. He also continued to remind them carefully. You can create anything you like as long as you stick to this theme. Reese sat on his small vehicle, looking excited as he spun his cane repeatedly. Now, let's move quickly to the refining room. Oh, that's right. Don't forget to change your clothes. After he left, only Yom Song-ha remained standing there. The other students suddenly stood up, seeing this as an opportunity. Hans and a few others harbored a thought in their minds. A golden opportunity to speak with Senior Yom Song-ha. He stepped forward excitedly to open the conversation. Hello, Senior. He looked very polite and was about to introduce himself. I'm Hans. Before he could finish, a gloomy atmosphere radiated around Yom Song-ha. Beat it. Hans didn't dare linger any longer and left dejectedly. Yes. The atmosphere of the class suddenly became somber. Song-ha stood still in one spot with a cold face and closed eyes. Those sharp, cold eyes suddenly opened and looked in one direction. While Sehun, paying no mind, was sauntering out of the classroom, he spoke up. Lee Sehun. He stopped to receive a question. Just how much do you know about me? The body of the brawny, robust man emitted a swirling red mana. I heard that the mastery of the Fire Will Remnant Flame Spear is determined by the number of fire wheels. Lee Won Ryong, the current master of the Hoa Hoa sect and an A-rank hero, has reached 8 wheels. Sehun walked more slowly toward the door and gave him an answer. Since the 3 wheels you just created were very easy, if done correctly, you could completely maintain 6 wheels simultaneously. Yom Song-ha quickly followed behind while calling out, Wait, so what about it? Sehun suddenly spoke, causing him to freeze in his tracks. You've reached the 7th wheel before, haven't you? He lazily put his hands in his pockets and caught him off guard. But then one day, you could no longer maintain it. Song-ha stood behind him, trembling with rage as he watched his back. How does he know that when I haven't even reported it to Master yet? His face turned cold and the words from his lips also became icy. You see, I have a bit of a talent for controlling fire, but when I look at the fire you manifest, I feel something very strange. You can't fully detonate the remaining residual force, or rather, you're letting it fly off chaotically. Song-ha walked close and asked directly, Do you know what the cause is? His face froze and his eyes widened upon hearing. I have a few guesses, but I don't see any need to tell you why. Yom Song-ha stammered out. What? He stood behind him, clenching his arm at his side. State your conditions. Sehun didn't hesitate and just pointed an index finger up. First, you must pay a worthy price for all my advice and help. 2 fingers were now held up on his hand. Second, when faced with difficult decisions, you must consult my opinion. As soon as Sehun finished speaking, he walked away. Let me know your decision before we step into the refining room. Yom Song-ha, leaning back, didn't hesitate or think further, and immediately gave an answer. I agree. His voice was serious as he set a condition. If you can prove it. Time shifted to another place. Afternoon at the blacksmith shop. In this area, several people wearing identical uniforms were working. Sehun was focused on picking up an object to place into the hot furnace. Is he forging without even drawing a single sketch? Does he mean to say there's no need to pre-check the selected stones placed in the kiln? Fire attribute or and dark attribute or were mixed in a 7:3 ratio. 2 people came up behind his hard-working back and started whispering. If he just stuffs it in like that, what if all the attribute mana vanishes? Why would the department valedictorian do something so crazy? His eyes didn't waver. He only focused on his calculations. The temperature was increased until the attribute mana began to leak out. Sehun quickly took off the glove he was wearing. He directly used his bare hand to reach into the fire while simultaneously controlling the mana flame to hold that attribute firmly. That was the heat substitution technique. Reese broke out in a cold sweat while watching from the outside. He's performing heat substitution already? So that's why Professor Kim In-cheol accepted the public auction application. A slight smile played at the corner of Sehun's mouth. To ordinary eyes, it might look like a normal heat substitution. But to Yom Song-ha, a completely different scene must be appearing. At another moment, he was silently watching with wide eyes. Watch very closely. Black shoes touched the pedal, pressing down with the tip of the toe. A source of red fire mana mixed with a bit of black erupted. The fire attribute mana spreading outward was brought inside, while the dark attribute mana digging deep inside was placed on the outside. In this way, the balance between the 2 opposing mana flows was maintained, creating a perfect circle. Song-ha stood with his arms crossed, appearing focused on watching but feeling disappointed. Is that all? The pupils in Sehun's eyes spun like fire wheels. My second mana attribute was originally forbidden because it was thought to hinder the fire wheel remnant flame spear. Yom Song-ha still looked bewildered with wide eyes, then reached up to scratch his head. If I use it this way, I've dropped down to the level of the 5th wheel. Sehun was startled to hear that. What? Song-ha performed 5 wheel rotations right before his eyes and explained to him. I succeeded in perfecting the dark fire wheel, but I don't have enough strength to maintain it until 6. Sehun still had to affirm that, regardless, a dark fire wheel is still stronger than 7 ordinary fire wheels. He looked a bit troubled, eyes tightly shut, and then turned away. The Hoa Hoa sect periodically sends instructors to check the skills of the successor disciples active outside. A giant black dark circle was created for the fire mana to pass through, and if anyone fell below the 6th will level, they would be stripped of their successor status. Sehun very nonchalantly gave an old-fashioned solution. Then just do it the old way for this one time. Song-ha, dejected, created a small circle in his palm. That way won't work either. The black mana was released powerfully behind the fire wheel. My dark attribute mana is now no longer capable of being controlled. Sehun was also feeling a headache, brow furrowed. When will that instructor arrive? Yom Song-ha gave him the answer immediately. Tomorrow. He put a hand to his chin, eyes opening to look in another direction in thought. He once said that losing the successor position means being expelled immediately. A method that can be applied in just one day. Suddenly, he placed a hand firmly on Song-ha's shoulder. Hey, Sehun looked excited as he asked a question right then. If your successor position is secured, could you do something? He replied seriously and briefly. I could. His gaze became serious again. Very well. Sehun smiled and took out a high-grade, best quality red resonance dark stone. Yom Song-ha's link, a type of or where fire attribute and dark attribute mana coexist. The wavelength created by these 2 attributes will resonate with the innate ability. First of all, we're going to change your weapon. Song-ha then led him to what appeared to be a high-end room. This is a Car-Cuff's private training room. Only those ranked first in the top 100 of the dojo or top 30 of the departments are allowed to use it. Sehun walked in and could only sigh out a sentence. Truly a show-off, aren't you? He pressed a single touch on the blue screen. We can change the interface here too, right? I'll modify it a bit. Both of them stood still and saw the interface change before their eyes. Sehun saw it and immediately pointed, teasing Songha. The Hoa Hoa sect? Are you that homesick? He explained very calmly. Master sent it to me, so I only use it casually now and then. He took the dark stone in his hand, looking at it excitedly as he got to work. Well then, let's start crafting the training equipment. With just a gentle snap, that dark stone broke slightly in half. High-grade, best quality red resonance dark stone link. A type of or where fire attribute and dark attribute mana coexist. The wavelength created by these two attributes will resonate with the innate mana. A long, sharp weapon had just finished being crafted. Done. Songha held the two spears in his hands, looking at them with some concern. Holding one spear already felt awkward, and now I have to handle two. Sehun appeared very composed. This is more suitable for controlling two types of attribute mana. Sehun stood opposite him, hands on his hips, and pointed his hand to guide him. From now on, create a fire wheel with your left hand and release dark attribute mana with your right hand. He was a bit surprised after hearing that. Just release it? He affirmed. That's right. Songha closed his eyes to stay calm. His gaze became cold and sharp, both hands holding the spear's front and back spun in a circle. Songha suddenly had to stop when he realized the spear was emitting mana. He didn't understand and raised the spear to stare at it. What was that just now? Sehun calmly pointed at it and explained to him. It means you unintentionally let the dark attribute mana overflow into your left hand. He felt the mana radiating from the spear. The mixing and escaping of multiple attribute manas is a natural phenomenon. But in your case, it's so chaotic that it's self-restricting. Perhaps it's because all this time, you've only ever suppressed the dark attribute mana. Sehun attached a bracelet to his wrist. If you can manage to get used to both types of mana at the same time, reaching the sixth wheel will happen very quickly. Wear this during your practice too. Songha looked at the bracelet on his wrist and smiled. You have good stuff, don't you? After that, he used the spear to practice continuously with all sorts of stances. 3 hours of training had passed. Sehun stood outside watching, smiling with satisfaction at the progress. He adapts so quickly. Is it because this is the training method his own future self thought of? Sensing through every cell of his body with the surrounding mana source to see how talented his past version was. Breathing rhythm, muscle movement, the shifting of the center of gravity. The mana wavelength circulated throughout the body and was released at the tip of the spear. Sehun realized he was being watched and became curious. What are you staring at? Sehun rested his chin on both hands, acting very innocent. What do you think? I'm just collecting data. He was resting for a bit, using a hand to wipe his cheek, when he suddenly froze. I need it to craft the weapon you'll be using. Sehun sat on the chair very naturally. This time I'm making it to submit as an assignment, so don't hope for too much. Songha turned his face away, avoiding him. Who would ever expect a weapon crafted by a first-year student? Sehun wouldn't sit still, glancing toward a spot. By the way, Songha swung the two spears in his hands down hard from above. Is there any reason you absolutely must keep the successor position? He didn't turn his face back and gave a brief answer. Master wants me to become the sect leader. He stood there letting the two spears hang down, his voice also indifferent. So as a disciple, I simply follow his wishes. The person who had adopted the orphan Yom Songha and cared for him was the S-rank hero, and also the first sect leader of the Hoa Hoa sect. On the photo hanging on the wall, the face and name of that person were clearly recorded. Yom Jinhyan. When he was little, he sat beside Songha, patting his head and teaching him. Although he had lost his strength after retiring due to injury, as a teacher and also like a father, he must still have absolute influence over this guy. Sehun, on the other hand, closed his eyes and remembered the moment the three of them met. Get along with each other. Okay? Link level 3. Yes. Songha shifted his eyes to the corner and wanted to know, why are you helping me? His eyebrows furrowed down over his eyelids, eyes tightly shut in thought. Again, a gloomy, desolate place shrouded everything from the forest to the city. The 6 great demon realms. The places swallowed by the chaos swamp were now teeming with magic beasts. Sehun sat with both legs to one side of the chair, turning toward him. I plan to infiltrate all of those demon realms. To do that, I need people to protect me, and I need materials to craft weapons to give to those people. He didn't hesitate to give an ambitious, okay, hand sign. If you're the next sect leader of the Hoa Hoa sect, your skills and financial situation should be quite well off, right? Seeing that behavior, he was at a loss for words. Truly pragmatic, aren't you? Sehun became serious, frowning. Of course. We haven't known each other long, so why would I do charity work for you? What? Songha tapped the spear against his back shoulder. Are you trying to say that if I receive help, I have to pay a worthy price? He glared and pointed a spear directly at his sharp eyes. Help me become the sect leader of the Hoa Hoa sect. Then, I will follow you into those 6 great demon realms. Past memories suddenly became familiar from Songha's own mouth in the past. Craft a weapon for me. Now, I will destroy the demon gods in your place. Sehun's mouth curled into a smirk. From between his fingers, he took out a brand new dark stone. You won't regret it, right? Between the palms of his hands, that dark stone continuously generated violent mana. Now, even if you don't like it, I'm going to put you on the sect leader's throne. The red resonance dark stone link mark was activated. At the common training hall on the first floor of Flavium, Hyanon appeared formally with his attendants. It's been a while, young master. I am Gang Hyanon, a 7-ring assessor of the Hoa Hoa sect. Songha noticed the 3 people behind him. Who are those people over there? Hyanon reached out his hand to introduce them. They are all disciples personally selected by the sect leader. He asked me to help open their eyes with a practice match between me and the young master. He even intentionally covered his mouth and chuckled as he mentioned it. Because the young master is the most talented person after the next sect leader. Songha was not amused and warned him, "Hey, Instructor Gang Hyanon." His cold gaze pinned him down. The next successor to the sect leader position hasn't been decided yet. Watch your words. Hyanon still felt natural and let a blatant smile show on his face. Ah, I sincerely apologize. Perhaps I was a bit confused for a moment. Hyanon extended his arm, getting serious about the important matter. So, shall we begin the proficiency test now? Songha showed no respect and directly refused. No. Inside a semi-swirling circle, a title appeared. I request to perform the promotion test to the 7th ring. Hyanon wore a look of contempt on his face. A fool who only knows training dares to dream of the sect leader's seat? He recalled the words of the person who would back him up and acted arrogantly. If Yom Songha wants to challenge the 7th ring level, then take him down thoroughly. No matter what happens, I will step in and settle everything smoothly. Hyanon stood opposite him and gave a long-winded explanation. From the 7th ring level onward, the exam content includes direct combat with the instructor. You should also think about Great Elder Yom Jinhyan at the main sect. Right now, this is still too early for you, young master. Songha stood there resisting, not caring at all. You talk too much. Songha even dared to poke at his pride. Or are you just afraid of being stripped of your instructor title? Hearing that, Hyanon went mad and immediately called his men. Bring my spear here right now. This 7th ring promotion will be carried out in the form of a domain duel. He held the spear upright in his hand. This domain duel format is actually very simple. It's a pure contest of strength. Whichever side has a stronger fire will wins. The condition for promotion is that you must win or at least draw. Songha looked on with sharp eyes, holding 2 swords in his hands. As soon as the shout went out, "All right, let's begin!" Upon seeing his weapons for the first time, Hyanon confidently covered his mouth and mocked him. Using dual spears? How unrefined. Songha didn't care much. His sharp eyes focused as he swung the 2 spears and charged with violent fire mana. Hyanon still stood there acting reproachful. Have you forgotten the sect leader's instructions to suppress your dark attribute mana? That kind of chaotic flame will never be recognized as a fire wheel. Sehun smirked after creating swirling fire rings around himself. Let's see the result when we truly get serious. Hyanon seemed very confident, just swinging the spear in a circle behind him. You will definitely regret this. He began to get serious, moving into a stance and swirling out fire rings. Light from the fire attribute mixed with the dark attribute erupted, making everyone vanish from sight. His eyes suddenly bulged out. What? The form of a black dragon pierced through the fire rings and gnawed on them. What the hell is going on? Is my fire will being swallowed? No. Is it being completely torn apart? His eyes, shadowed with dark circles, were still in shock, and just a few seconds later, the spear in his hand snapped into 3 pieces. Hyenan knelt on the ground before the shattered weapon. Songha held the 2 spears in his hands arrogantly before his broken state. Did you say it was unrefined? Sehun stood behind watching with a bit of regret. What will happen next? What a waste of excellent materials. Songha held the 2 spears in his hand and talked to him. Once the promotion ceremony is held in the near future, I will be officially recognized as the Yomo instructor and the legitimate successor. Sehun lowered his head curiously. How can you take the sect leader's position? Songha stood beside him, glancing over. 2 conditions must be met. First, one must reach the 8th ring level, and second, receive consensus from the majority of the other instructors. Sehun crouched down near the ground, picking up the pieces from the spear. Even if you reach the 8th ring level, can you make them agree? Songha immediately affirmed firmly. I can win that consensus through combat, so that won't be an issue. However, at that time, it won't be a domain duel anymore, so things won't be as easy as today. Hearing that, he stood up and put his hands back in his pockets. Then it probably won't take too much time. Songha stood beside him, still seriously gripping the spear in his hand, saying, That sounds quite easy, doesn't it? Sehun just casually replied, I say that because I see it's completely feasible. Just look at today's results. He looked again. What's wrong? He said with a balanced gaze. From now on, you should think about how you're going to pay this price. Songha closed his eyes, looking calm, his mouth curling up as if he could comply. Just let me know what you need to settle this account. Whether it's cash or materials, I will provide everything within my power. His voice dropped a tone, becoming seriously deep. Furthermore, I have another item I want to commission from you. Sehun was a bit surprised, glancing at him. A new order so soon? Suddenly, Songha gripped the weapon in his hand. These things aren't bad in quality, but I'm only borrowing one temporarily to submit for class. His mouth broke into a smile as if he had already calculated his intention. If he can create these in just a few short hours, I'm truly curious to see how the next spear will be forged. Songha slapped Sehun's shoulder hard. Create a weapon for me that's even easier to use. Sehun sauntered along beside him. Put that spear down. You almost stabbed us. What did you just say? The link index with target Yom Songha has increased to level 2. As the bond level increases, the relationship between the 2 parties will become stronger. The current connection with target Yom Songha is transaction. Every time a transaction with the target is completed, a link stone will be formed. The crystallization speed of the link stone will increase during the transaction process. Current number of stones: 0. The scene shifted to a place crowded with spectators and light shining on an object on the stage at the auction house. The host looked very enthusiastic, waving his arms to introduce. Thank you very much for your patience. The regular auction of the second-year cultivation department is now permitted to begin. Sehun appeared here in a row of spectator seats. I didn't think there would be this many people attending on a regular day. Erica sat beside him, noticing his outfit. Did you change your style? He just crossed his arms and shifted his gaze. Professor Kim in Sheol reminded me that outward appearance is also very important. And so in his head, he thought more carefully. It seems the title of department valedictorian really is something quite different. In Sheol appeared calmly under the lights on the stage. It will be very difficult to exercise public control over someone who is the center of everyone's attention. Sehun sat with his arms crossed, a mysterious smile showing on his face as he watched. I'm quite curious about Michael's plan to take over the management of the refining department. Today's theme is iron swords. There are 36 products submitted in total, and we will have an additional special quality inspection step. According to the host's words, a white cloth was brought out on the stage. This fabric is Siagium, woven from the melted fur of the S-rank beast, the white tiger. It is soft but as durable as metal, while also resisting slashing attacks. Another man came to assist, seriously using something to slash hard at the cloth. Thanks to that characteristic, a loud sound rang through the room. The host pointed to the phenomenon just demonstrated on the floor. As you can see, in order to increase damage potential, we can easily detect items that have reduced durability. In this auction, we will use Seagium to eliminate such defective goods. A sword was the first item handed over, and now, the first sword to be introduced is Student Joseph's blue horn. The murmur of the crowd began to rise. Oh, that looks interesting. It seems they've prepared everything very thoroughly. Erica looked sharply at Sehun sitting next to her. Do you know why they're doing that? He analyzed an image of a white tiger beast with blue eyes. Most people only know that the white tiger's body is very tough, but in reality, its ability is a bit more complex. The fur, flesh, and bones all carry completely different characteristics. In particular, its fur has the ability to mimic the sharpness of any metal weapon that touches it. So no matter how good the weapon used is, it will gradually wear down the durability of that item. Erica put her hand to her chin, thinking seriously for a moment. If so, wouldn't the white light greatsword be at a disadvantage? Because swords that prioritize sharpness usually have very low durability. Sehun rested his hand on his chin, his face showing great anticipation. Exactly. This is clearly an obvious trap aimed at me and Professor Kim in Cheol. However, if the sword breaks here, the reputation of the guiding professor will also be seriously affected. That only happens in the case of not crafting it carefully. On the stage, the host struck the auction gavel hard. The 25th sword has been sold for 4 million won. The final sword was brought out and the host began the introduction. And now, finally, sword number 36. From the first-year valedictorian of the refining department, Lee Sehun. The quality inspection process for the white light greatsword is now permitted to begin. As soon as the sharp blade struck the white cloth hard, a powerful burst of force erupted. The man gripped the hilt firmly and squeezed hard, but that sword suddenly flew out of the person's control. Michael, witnessing that scene, froze with a pale face. Just now the white light greatsword still retained its sharpness, only having a part of the tip broken off. What just happened?